Welcome back. Welcome to the afternoon session of the 2023 Annual Conference of In-House Lawyers. I hope you all had a nice lunch break. For those who did not attend the morning session, this is Catherine now, and I'm the MC for today's conference. Before we start, I would like to share a few housekeeping rules. Firstly, the afternoon session will run from 2 to 5:35 p.m. and carries 3 CPD points. Please refer to the conference brochure for the program rundown, course outline, and speaker profiles. For those who have joined us this morning, please also sign in for the afternoon session as well in order to claim your CPD points for the afternoon session. The conference will be conducted in English and Mandarin and supported by simultaneous interpretation in the 2 languages. We have some devices for participants joining us here in person. This will be provided on a first-come and first-served basis. You may select Channel 1 for English and Channel 2 for Mandarin. Please contact one of our staff members if necessary. For Zoom participants, you may mute the original audio and select the audio channel from the control panel at the bottom to listen to the conference in your preferred language. Please switch off your mobile phones and other sound-emitting devices and put them into silent mode throughout the conference. Panelists may take questions from the floor. For those who are joining via Zoom, please use Zoom's Q&A function. Panelists will address your questions as they see fit. And you should also be given a QR code together with the conference brochure when you enter the room. We'll be updating event photos from time to time, and you may access the photos by scanning the QR code. You are also advised to take note of the directions to the emergency exits. We have a tight but attractive program this afternoon, but we cannot stop before we thank our sponsors. Our diamond sponsors today are China Resources Holdings Company Limited, LexisNexis, and Thomson Reuters. Our platinum sponsors are China Resources Land Limited, Harley Westwood, and Rigels, Link Asset Management Limited, Link's Law Offices, and Withers. Last but not least, we also have Canon Hong Kong Company Limited supporting our conference as the digital sponsor. Some of our sponsors have set up some interesting booths here today in the foyer. You may take your time during the break later to explore some interesting and helpful solutions that may support your practice. In the morning session, we learned from Secretary for Justice and other panel speakers about the uniqueness of the Hong Kong legal profession in China, which echoes with our theme this year, from corporate connector to super connector, highlighting the extended role and ability of in-house lawyers in connecting our companies as well as our country to the world. Let's start without further ado our next session, which will be conducted in Mandarin. 以下环节将会以普通话进行，嘉宾会分享内地企业在全球迅速发展的情况下，如何为企业律师带来机遇。我们的讲者包括迪冠通集团首席营运官兼首席法务总监林涛涛律师 Annie。CLECCS 中国法律教育及就业讲座系列创办人梅品和律师 Simon 和国泰君安国际合规总监兼法律及合规部主管赵彤律师 Chris。本环节的主持人是华泰国际法律顾问魏志涛律师 Toby。事不宜迟，我把时间交给 Toby。
大家好，再次欢迎大家回到我们年会的现场。我是这次讨论的主持 Toby Wei 魏志涛。我们本次的讨论呢，将会聚焦于中国内地企业的发展为我们香港律师，尤其是企业律师带来的机会。我们非常荣幸邀请到3位非常资深的企业律师，跟我们分享他们的看法。在我左手边是Simon Mui梅品和律师，梅律师他是一家对冲基金的法律合会总监， 而非常重要的是，他也是 CLASS 就是中国法律教育与就业讲座系列的创办人。他在过去10几年里就帮助了不少中国内地的律师和法学学生，提供了很多事业上的帮助。然后在 Simon 旁边的是 Chris赵彤律师，他是国泰君安国际的合规总监以及法务与合规部门的负责人。他也是我们律师会的新任理事。国泰君安，我相信我也不需要做太多的介绍，它是业内领先的一家中资券商。最后一位是 Annie Lin 林涛涛律师，他是迪冠通的首席运营官以及首席法务总监。由于可能很多的在座的各位可能对迪冠通的了解并不深，待会 Annie 会他希望用自己的一点小小的时间来介绍一下迪冠通的发展。我今天为大家准备了一系列的问题啊，但是首先就想请几位从你们所在的领域还有你们熟悉的领域介绍一下我们中资企业近年的发展。我们要不先请 Simon。
大家好，我叫 Simon，可能香港的朋友不一定很熟悉我，虽然是香港人，但是呢，我在内地办了一个比较大的一个法律的一个平台，帮助呢内地年轻的律师去寻找他们的那些职业发展和教育的，就希望这期交流后呢，大家可以多认识我。好了，我之前呢是一个民企在香港上市的法务总监，它是呢一个太阳能的公司。我对我来说呢，这个是印象很深刻的那段经历，因为呢，看见那些民企在这个“一带一路”的那个走出来。首先呢，因为它在香港上市，所以呢，它提供了很多的那种机会给香港本地的律师，比如说呢，可以做上市合规啊，可以做其他的就是香港相关的法律。但同时呢，因为香港这边呢，他们比较熟悉国外的东西，所以同时在我们做那些海外投资的时候呢，很多时候也是香港的法务部这边牵头，所以呢，在过去几年呢，我们在看很多的海外的电站的那些收购的时候呢，我们也看到我们香港本地律师也提供了不少机会。也过去几年，我们看得到呢，这个国企民企来香港的越来越多，然后也不少的香港本地律师，也有不少的港票律师在这个方面就做出很好的成绩。所以这个就是我从我自己的领域所观察到的东西。
大家下午好，刚刚好是一个午饭以后的这个 section， 我觉得可能大家也就是聊聊天。我们今天这个 section 主要也是分享一下彼此不同的角度，关于这个我们公司法务在香港的这个一些的这个职业的一些心得吧。那么其实挺好的。今天这个 session 我们用的是一个普通话，这个其实在以往的这类似的活动里面呢不太多。那么其实也正正反映了我们香港整一个的这个法律行业的这个多样性。我理解呢，这个中资的这个企业呢，其实在香港历史非常非常悠久。我刚刚在午饭的时候还跟一个同行聊起说，我们有一些很大型的中资企业，其实在1930几年就已经来港了。这个是一个相当长的一个时间。那么中资的金融企业，就是我自己所在的这个行业哈，我们自己其实在香港落地生根也有30多年哈，甚至有一些更大型的金融企业，其实他们在香港的历史非常久。那么这段时间以来呢，其实中资的金融企业它在香港本地的市场，还有一个我们常说的这种跨境的市场，他们都起到非常重要的作用。那么本地市场可能也不用我多说哈，大家都了解，包括我们中资我们有发钞银行，对吧？金融企业来说，也有非常大规模的这种大型的头部的这种券商、保险公司、基金公司、资产管理公司都很多。那么对香港本地的这个金融市场的发展，包括说促进这个产品的多样性，然后呢这个金融服务的稳定，还有这个持续发展。 包括说这个在提供融资便利，对吧？甚至 IPO 大家特别熟悉的，其实都承担了相当重要的一个作用。无论是这个企业的数量，还是说这个市场的这个交易份额，其实在占比上都是相当高的。那么基于香港本地的这个特有的这个联通者的这个角色，那么中资企业大家可以想到，就是一直就是持有一种投资中国投资这样的一种理念，在香港去开展业务。也就是说，我们强调的是说，在一个香港这么一个特殊的地位下面，我们能够帮助到中国的企业往海外去走，从金融的角度哈，我们也帮到世界。进入到中国的这个资本市场，所以这当中，这么多年以来，我们面对了很多风雨哈，也面对了很多需要跟业界去沟通、自己成长的这么一些机会和时候。那么到现在目前为止呢，大家都能看到，就是中资它有已经在规模上、在企业文化上面都有自己比较独特的一些地方，那么也成长的其实是比较好的这样的一个行业。那么尤其是在这个内控，还有这个今天我们比较重点谈到的是这个法务团队，甚至可能还有一些风险控制的团队的一些角度，其实他们在过去几年都发生了很大的一个变化，不管是从专业性，公司治理，还有这个风控管理的这个能力，都得到了很高的提升。
请 Annie 介绍一下，可能从你们 FinTech 行业的角度，以及迪冠通的发展来给我们介绍一下，谢谢。
好的，谢谢 Toby， 谢谢两位刚才的介绍。那个确实啊，现在这个午饭后啊，感觉这个大家稍微有点困了啊。那个我呢，稍微把镜头拉回来一点点，讲一点微观的东西。我先，可能大家不太熟悉我们迪冠通这间公司，所以我先花1分钟的时间简单的介绍一下我们自己，这样可能待会儿我讲的东西大家就更有这个画面感和这个背景情况。那么迪冠通呢是一家很年轻的公司，我们创立于这个2021年的年初，是由港交所的前主席这个李小加先生和东英集团的创始人张高波先生2位创始人共同创立的。我们呢自认为是一家双创公司，创新创业的一家平台。主要的这个使命是把国际的资本或者全球的资本连接到中小微企业去。我们的起点是从中国内地的中小微企业开始，去把内地的有多种多样性的各行各业的非常有发展潜力的、非常有这个资本需求的这样的中小微企业，希望把他们带到一个国际的舞台上面来，通过这个迪冠通引入全球的资本，去给他们助力发展。那么我们在这个今年的上半年也成功这个开设了一家澳门的这个金融资产交易所。那么希望把这个立足于澳门或者说港澳作为一个这个国际资本引入的平台，那么通过澳门交易所的这个舞台，是这个中小微企业的这样的一个新的多样化的一个资产的这个这样的一个 asset class 能够带到这个国际资本的舞台上面去，也让国际的投资人能够享受到投资中小微企业的这样的机会，特别是中国内地的中小微企业这样的投资机会。那讲这么多呢，其实回到这个主题的话呢，严格意义上来讲，其实我们不算是一家内地企业吧，应该更多的说是因为其实基于2位创始人的背景，以及像我这样的就是加入的比较早的这个创始成员，其实我们可能是内地出生长大受教育，但是其实已经来到香港，或者是到了这个境外很多年，接受了教育，那么在这里工作生活，其实已经把香港当做了自己的家。那么所以说，其实我们严格上来说不一定是内地企业，但是的确就是从公司的发展的这个立足之本，或者说我们背靠的是中国内地的这个经济，中国内地的市场，中国内地发展的非常的前沿的这种 科技化、数字化的这样的基础，那么去打造这样的一个生意，或者是做这样的一个平台。所以这样的解读的话，我们也应该可以算是一家内地企业。所以今天有这个机会来跟几位包括在场的这个同行和这个朋友们、新老的朋友们一起来分享一下这个像我们这样的一家这个应该算是有几个标签吧，金融科技企业、创新创业平台，再加上有一定的内地的背靠大陆、背靠这个内地巨大的市场和数字化的这个经济。发展的这样的一个标签，那么希望是有这个荣幸和这个资格吧，能跟大家来分享这样的一个话题。那在我看来呢，就是刚才其实几位讲的都非常的，就是有从各自的角度来讲，我们现在的内地的公司，或者说更多的是这个中国内地背景的这样的公司。在香港这样一个国际化的舞台上面，需要什么样的人才，或者我们看到的这个我们香港的精英们在这样的一个市场环境，在这样背景的公司里面发展的机会是什么的话，其实我觉得这是一个巨大的、有无限潜力的一个发展的空间和前景。为什么这样讲呢？其实刚才今天上午已经有好几位嘉宾分享过了，我们有香港的律师们，现在有大湾区的机会，这是一个多么庞大的市场。然后我们有背靠这个香港现在有这样的非常的蓬勃发展的金融科技，以及要发展成为一个非常创新的这种科技化的国际的舞台或者国际市场这样的一个大的环境和背景。那么以及我们有这么巨大的一个人才库，今天早上听到我们香港律师的数量和比例都是在国际的这个任何一个 jurisdiction 来说，可能都算是领先的。那么质素这么的高，我们有这么大的庞大的一个人才库，我觉得这个简直是对不光是对内地企业来说，可能对希望有这个携手这样的人才市场、携手这样的发展机会的这样企业来说，都是一个有无限潜力和空间的一个市场。那么我先讲到这儿，然后我们接下来再讨论。
谢谢。那我们看到内地企业的发展呢，对我们香港律师来讲，我们非常关心的其中一点就是内地企业的需求以及他们对我们香港律师的法律就业市场的影响。那 Simon 你一直都非常关注这一方面，你可以分享一下你的观察吗？
好啊，没问题啊。关于这个金融类型或者是 fintech 创新类型，就我交给他们。我主要从上市公司这几个角度来看。其实呢，我觉得主要需要把握好自己的那些 skills 吧。那他们需要什么 skills 呢？比如说最近20年，很多内地的企业来香港上市，然后这个比如说上市合规啊，怎么样去融资啊？比如说你上市后怎么样去继续去发债也好啊。去配股也好啊，这些都是一种很好的那个 legal skills。再比如说呢，我当年一点都不懂这个太阳能的，但是呢，我还是能去个中国企业做太阳能的原因，就是因为它在香港上市。香港上市呢，所以它需要一些懂香港合规啊，懂这个融资的人，所以呢，我就利用这个渠道进去了。那进去后呢，就可以慢慢把那些太阳能的东西去学回来。另外我觉得他们也很看重的就是你对于那个外国的那个市场，比如说外国的那些法律，比如说你不一定在所有国家的法律都懂，但是呢，因为大家都很多都从国际律所出来的，就比如说你做过海外并购，你怎么样去联系 去海外的律师啊，怎么样去跟他们沟通啊，怎么样至少你不懂当地的法律，但是至少把当地的那个医术找出来，再找当地的律师，这些可能就是香港的律师在国际方面都是比较有经验的。如果你能跟他们说你对于这个香港法律比较懂，又有这个国际律所的经验，这些都是他们是很看重的。所以你有这种 skills 对于这中国的那些企业，无论国企也好，民企也好，都是很有用的。
好的，那 Chris 会有补充吗？比如说，你们可以讲一下你们所在的团队，或者说你们所在的行业的法律合规 legal and compliance 的人员构成，然后你们对于或者说你们公司里面的一些工作文化是怎么样，可以跟我们分享一下吗？
好的，首先呢，就是其实企业它内部的这个企业文化其实都会有很不一样的地方，所以我的分享可能更多的是一个金融企业啊，甚至是我自己所在的公司的一个亲身的体验。当然，我自己之前呢也是在国际的这个投行有工作过，担任这个内部的法务，所以也有一些的这个比较，一些感觉。所以可能有那么几点，我觉得可以值得跟大家分享一下，就是我自己的一些体会。其实中资的金融企业呢，它其实是相当艰难的一个群体。为什么这么说呢？它是既受间接既受境内的这个监管，也就是我们的这个以券商为例啊，中国证监会，那么的监管，那么还有这个国资委，还有外管局、人民银行和各种的这个监管主体。那么在香港展业呢，它又受香港证监会和当地的我们香港这边的这个监管的要求。那么国内呢，我们是一个成文法国家，所以有很多的这个不管是公司治理的要求，包括上市的要求内部的一些东西呢，是比较按照中国的这个成文法的这样的一个中国内地的这样的一个法制要求去做。香港呢，我们是一个 common law system。我们是一个普通法的地区，所以呢，有很多的一些日常的管理，还有包括说内部一些架构的设置呢，也一定是要按照香港这边的这个监管要求也好，市场管理的这个 practice 来做，都是这样。那么，所以面对一个情况就是说，我们可能要符合至少是两地的这样的一个很全面的这样的一个管理要求，从法律合规，还有甚至是风控各个层面都会面对同样的问题。那么，所以是这样的一个背景下面呢，导致到就是中资的这个金融企业呢，他们往往是在运行过程当中呢，我自己看来是选择一个比较务实的这样一个发展的道路，也就是说做合适自己的东西。这个，因为我们需要在刚才讲的这个两地这么不一样的体系下面也找到一个平衡，需要寻找自己的这个市场的这个定位，还有自己发展的一个空间。所以呢，也是这样的一个背景呢，我们对法务人员的这个要求呢，其实还是有我们自己独特的一些地方。那举个例子是说，近几年来看到一个明显的趋势呢，是法务和合规呢，他们需要在一起工作。很多的这个金融企业呢，事实上法律合规是一个部门。那么当然也有是法律和合规是分开的，但不管它是合在一起还是分开，他们在工作的流程上面都是配合的相当的紧密。而且我们也会要求法务的这个同事他们在提供法律意见的时候呢，一定要充分考虑到一些关键的合规角度，甚至有时候还有风控的角度。那这个我们在座同仁可能会觉得，哎，那我是当律师的，对吧？我是做法律的，我怎么懂啊？那当然也不是说让我们的法务人员去做一些 decision making， 但是他们需要有这样的一个角度去思考。这是一个我自己看到，就是说中资金融企业他们比较独特的一点。另外一个呢，就是刚才提到，就是因为中资企业本身在企业文化上面，他们正在走的这条路上面的特点呢，他们对法务人员的这个知识面要求呢，也是会比较要求大家知识面比较宽，尤其是在团队里面因为现在也是中资金融企业发展的一个阶段性问题呢，团队的规模呢 不会特别大。那么同时呢，中资企业也很强调一个复合型人才的这样的一种培养思路。什么意思呢？也就是说，我们需要一些关键岗位的同事呢，他在自己专业的领域呢有一个抓手举个例子，我是 DCM lawyer， 我是 ECM lawyer， 或者是我是 corporate lawyer， 那你自己专业的事情肯定要搞好，这个是没有疑问的。那么同时，我们希望这些律师呢，也去 develop 一些其他一些的领域的一些专业能力，例如说可能要在一般的合同 review。甚至是数据保护甚至是比较前沿的一些 fintech 的 issue， 我们需要律师同时在几个领域都有摄入，都有一个成长的这样的一个动力，还有这个学习的能力。那这个其实不光是在法务部门，其实在中资企业里面很多的部门都有这样的一个要求对人才的培养也有这么要求，所以这一点呢，可能在一个很成熟的外资金融机构里面呢，相对少一些尤其是在我们法务团队呢，一般分工是比较细一些。我们通常说 DCM lawyer、ECM lawyer， 对吧？我们在企业里面可能就是一直比较专的从事那个领域的这个工作，这是一点。另外一个呢，就是可能在这个主动性方面还有沟通方面呢，我们也会说希望我们的这个法务人员呢，这个沟通能力会比较强、比较主动的。这也是一种工作文化，因为刚才也提到了，就是可能我们需要把风控这个角度呢，把它全面的放在一起去考虑，就是既有法律风险、合规风险，还有我们通常说的 risk management， 就是风控这几个领域，往往我们都需要在一起去工作，所以部门之间的这个沟通，还有这个理解对方的这个立场这方面，我们是这个要求的会比较高一些。
谢谢 Chris。Annie 会不会有一些补充？从你在一家初创企业的经验来讲。
其实刚才我非常同意两位已经就是 Simon Chris 已经讲过的这些就是那个已经我们要求法务合规的这个部门要具备的基本素质，我就不再讲了。那个相信在座的各位，这对各位都不是个问题。那从我们这种金融科技公司或者说创新的公司的角度而言，我稍微补充一点吧。这个常常有人说这个规则是用来打破的。那当然，在今天这个香港律师会的活动，可能讲这句不是太合适这个但是我觉得至少这句话可以说成是规则是我们可以去探索的，或者说我们可以再去运用，灵活的运用的。那么可能这样的一个理念，在我们这样的一家创新或者是创业的这样的一家公司来说，是比较重要的一个 mindset。那因为大家可以回想一下，就是之前就是可能若干年前，我们香港还没有对于比如说 virtual assets 或者是这种 SPAC 这种稍微新一点的这些事物，还没有一个非常清晰的认知或者一套相对明确的这个监管的规则的时候，那么在我们的同行里面，大家对这样的新生的事物是怎么样看待的，或者是大家当时都有过哪些想法和探讨？其实，一样的道理，就是我们在做一件新的事情，没有人做过的事情，或者是我们说的白一点，就是我们自己的法务的合规的团队，在我们创造这个新的产品的时候，需要把它落地成一套大家可以签署的文件的时候，我们都没地方去抄这个东西。那这个就非常的这个怎么说呢？说白一点，就是真的要创造。那么怎么创造？如果是一个已经有规则、已经有边界，你可以很清晰的知道我的游戏规则是什么，我要怎么样玩这个游戏的时候，那么可能这个我们就不能完全说是一个创造了，可能是更多的是一个你如何去遵循这些规则，去制定一套标准的问题。但是可能在我们日常的，在我的这样的一个日常的工作的这个环境下，更多的时间我是需要去 探索在现有的这个规则体系框架下，那么我们用一个什么样的方法和路径，能够给我们希望实现的这个商业目的，或者我们希望达成的这个目标，找一个合适的方式去落地，找一个能够在规则的边界内有可以这个灵活处理的空间的这种前提下，能够去把它落地的路径。那么这可能是时常是我和我的团队需要去面对的一些问题。所以，那么回到我们需要什么样的人，或者说我们什么样的人会适合我们这样的一个工作的环境或者要求的话呢？我觉得可能，说简单一点，就是能够灵活的去运用我们已经具备的知识和技能，我们已经在法律这个行业里面积累的这些经验和技术，能够灵活的运用到一个全新的场景，能够去适当的打破这个思维的边界，适当的去探索这个探索新的领域的精神，那么有独立思考的这个和创新的能力，可能这个是我们更加看重的，或者希望大家有这样的一个发展的一个目标和方向的这样的人才，可能是对我们来说是比较重要的特质。
感谢啊。刚才你们几位也说了很多，就你们觉得你们的员工需要具备的一些能力。其实我相信很多香港律师也是会有这种加入中资机构的想法，因为发展也好啊，它有各种不同的原因。那么除了你们刚才的所已经讲过要求的能力以外，你们还会看重哪一些点？而且如果说一个未来员工他在到岗之前，你们认为他应该会做出哪些准备去适应一种，因为毕竟每一种企业也确实有他们独特的文化，那你觉得他们应该做一些什么样的准备呢？
我自己觉得呢，语言还有文化还是很重要的。首先在个中国企业里面，普通话当然很重要的，但是要到哪个水准呢？哪个标准呢？就要到至少我是那种勉强合格的那种，至少要在我的那个 level 上面的那种才算比较好的。那首先语言先把这个普通话练习好了，对吧？然后在文化方面也是很重要的，因为在国企民企跟你平时在其他外国的 MNC 啊那个做事的那个风格还是很不一样的。那你怎么样可以提前去准备呢？那首先我自己本人呢在内地工作过几年的，所以呢对于怎么样跟内地的同事交流啊，他们的那个需求啊是比较了解的。另外你作为外部律师以前可能也是接触过一些国企民企，不过当时你是外部律师，也可以了解一下他们的那个需要，怎么样可以沟通更好一点呢？那其实入局之前呢，最好去找几个朋友已经在国企民企工作过几年的，他们会告诉你去怎么样的那个沟通可以更顺畅一点，这些我都觉得是很重要的。不过在这方面，除了语言啊、文化，自己的专业也一定要做得好了，这不能只是说自己的中文说得很好啊，了解自己内地文化，因为他招你的时候呢，他也是看重你本来的那个专业 skills， 所以你自己的那个他招你，想想为什么他招你呢？你最重要把握的是什么样的 skills 啊？这些也是很重要的。
Chris 有补充吗？
其实这个Simon 说的这个语言，这个我觉得大家肯定都非常熟悉的一个 topic 啊，因为很简单的一个事实就是说，当我们我在 junior 的时候我去假如说我在律师行求职，我去国际投行去求职的时候，我肯定要把我的英语练好，对吧？这个是很实在的一个东西。那么当你去一个中资企业去求职的时候，那肯定要把中文练好啊。这个当然咱们说的这个中文不是说，哎，你一定要 benchmark 到一个从小在内地长大的这样的一个同事的水平，其实不是这样的。 我自己团队里面有很多，基本上全都是香港本地的这个律师，他们的普通话能力呢，其实是在一个工作层面能沟通，这个是相当重要，或者讲得不好，但是至少能听得明白啊，这个是一个对吧？一个基本的东西。那么，但是你说我又听不懂，我又讲不好，那事实上呢，这个在沟通层面会有一个问题。那我们的 working language 一定是英文啊，so far 我们都是用英文的。那么，但是在跟一些主要的一些stakeholders 或者甚至是说管理层，我们这沟通的时候要很有效果的把一些很 difficult 的 message 要 deliver 的清楚的话，那这个中文的这个能力呢，还是很重要。所以这个补充一下刚才Simon讲的这一点。那么但是大家也当然不会觉得说，哎呀，我是不是那个普通话不行，我就完全不可能。其实也不是，因为团队里面也有不同的岗位，有一些岗位可能他在沟通方面需要的比较要求高一些，有一些岗位呢，坦白说，我反而更重视的是他的英文能力。这个是一个我们现在面对的一个情况。很多来我们公司 interview 的同行呢，其实他们的这个普通话能力、英文能力都相当优秀的。我也看到，像现在在香港有很多的律师，甚至有一些外国人的律师他们的中文 surprisingly 非常好啊，我们都碰到过。所以语言肯定是一个重要，但是我都不觉得现在在业界里面是一个障碍。这是第一个。另外一个，反而我想说的是，这个我们自己对自己的这个职业定位呢，可能在考虑中资企业之前呢，也是需要做一些适当的考量。为什么这么说呢？因为我自己也经历过这个加入中资企业之前，在外资行工作的这么一个经历，就是因为事实上，刚才我们也提到了，这个工作环境呢，它还是会有一些不同的地方。那么职业路径，包括你后续下来的这个发展的方向，包括你要培养自己的这个能力方面，都会跟在外资行呢会有一定的差别，但是其实原则上是一样的。我们都是金融企业，我们要求的这个专业性的这个水平是一样的，都有很高的要求，对吧？我们对这个行业的观察其实不会说差别很大，但是事实上，在一个大家都理解进入 in house 以后呢，其实你的 client 就是你的企业，对吧？这个是一个很现实的问题，所以你要选择一个企业进去的话，你在专业上面发展之余，还要考虑的是说，哎，我的团队、我的平台，我接受的企业文化是怎么样的？我觉得这点我是建议大家都做一些考量。另外一个，刚才也提到，就是因为企业本身它受到的监管的这个主体不一样，那么所以在知识层面呢，我是建议大家可以，假如说是考量一个中资金融企业的机会的话呢，首先也多了解一下境内监管的一些基本要求，境内的法律市场的一些基本的情况。甚至说境内这个金融市场的一些产品和市场的这个发展的现状，这样的话其实也帮助到大家可以更多的或者更快的入职以后去 pick up 这个一些相关的知识。那么因为中资金融企业它在香港虽然时间很长，但是咱们也看到就是它跟外资金融企业他们做的市场是有点差别，所以在产品形态、客户端。还有包括说面对的这个监管的要求呢，会有一些不同的地方。那这块我觉得大家可以多了解。
我先打个广告啊，我们对中文的要求没有那么严格。我们欢迎在座的有志之士都可以尝试我们的这个机会啊，我们还在招聘。这个为什么这么讲呢？其实今天我们的主题是from in-house connector to super connector。那其实，在我们这样的一个就是应该算是本身我们的宗旨就是连接国际资本和这个小微企业这样一个平台。其实我们自己就是一个 super connector。那我们自己的法律合规的这个团队，其实在整个公司里面又更加是一个核心的 super connector 的角色。因为什么？我们其实不光是做投资，境内的小微企业的投资，其他 regional 的小微企业的投资，我们同时也做国际资本的融资。那么我们同时又是一个在澳门的金融资产交易所的平台，所以这样多不同的 elements 放到一起，那其实我需要的人才，或者我们这样的一个平台需要的人才是多样化的人才，是多样化、多元化背景的、不同复合技能的人才。我们在跟香港或者澳门的监管机构沟通的时候，我需要在座各位讲广东话非常好的朋友们。那么我们在跟国内的这些小微企业、门店品牌，包括我们的合作伙伴去谈生意的时候，我需要大家发挥自己各自的，不管是普通的普通话，还是非常棒的普通话的这个水平，我们都需要。那么在我们去跟其他的东南亚也好、中东也好、美国也好，这些其他投资人去谈、去介绍我们的这个做的事情的时候，那么各位这个讲英文非常棒的朋友们就有发挥的空间。所以我觉得可能这只是从我们的视角，或者我们代表了某一类的这个企业的这个视角，也可能是内地背景，也可能是中资，也可能就是香港的这个本地的企业。但是由于我们现在身处的这个市场，我们做的这种多样化、多生态化的这种生意，那么我们香港作为一个核心的连接世界和中国，或者说连接全球的资本和本地市场的这样的一个核心的角色，那我其实觉得回到这个话题的话，我希望加入我们的朋友们是在自己擅长的领域内非常的自信，那么在自己不擅长的或者未知的领域有一个做好充分去学习和接受和探索的这样的一个心态，那么我们共同来成长。那其实回到地贯通的历史，我们只有短短2年多的时间，但是我们其实已经投资了将近1万个品牌门店，我们也融了3轮的融资，刚刚结束 C 轮，融了将近5亿美金的这个资金。那么在澳门开设了交易所，其实短短的都是在这2年24个月的时间内发生的事情。所以其实可以想象，我们的团队不是从 Day One 就是一个具备这些知识和技能，能做这些事情的一个已经完全准备好了的一个团队，不可能。我相信这个没有可能，在我们自己都是专业背景这个成长起来的这个律师，实话实说的讲，没有一个人能同时做这么多的事情，或者说同时把这些事情做得那么好。那说白了，这是一个学习和成长的过程。我们的 learning curve 可能是垂直的，但是我相信，在我们这个行业背景成长起来的专业人士，大家都是学霸，都是有超级强的学习能力和这个探索研究的能力的。那么 why not？ 我们为什么不能一起来做这个事情呢？所以可能回到我们这个领域的话，可能心态稍微更开放，或者说我们能够接受的这个多元化的这个背景、多元化的成长的多元化的这个人才的这个包容度会更高一点。那么当然了，就是还是归根到底的话，当然还是以大家的我们作为这个领域的专业人士多少年积累下来的这个经验和技能，包括语言的能力，包括我们基本的这些素质为基础的。那么在这个基础之上，还有无限的发挥的空间。
谢谢你。那我们讨论最后一部分，我就把我们的话题带到更加宏观的层面。刚才 Annie 提到，你们地贯通是把海外资金引进到中国内地。那你对于香港未来作为海外资金引进中国内地的这种桥梁的作用，你是怎么看？
其实我们是把国际的资本连接到，当然第一阶段是以中国大陆的这个市场为根基去引入这个国际资本到中国内地，但是更准确的说，其实我们也是在不断的扩大我们所谓的这中小微企业的概念。因为其实不光中国有中小微企业，其实我们看regionally 我们的这个东南亚的地区，我们甚至到这个其他日本、韩国或者是这个美洲、欧洲，其实都有这样的 业务发展的机会。那香港有一个得天独厚的这样的一个国际金融中心，以及现在在打造一个国际的科技和创新中心的这样的一个独特的这个在地位和这个在全球的这个金融市场里面的这样一个独特的中心的地位和角色。那么这对于我们这样的就是商业世界的需求来说，其实是一个得天独厚的一个合作的基础。那包括香港市场的人才，其实都是非常高标准的国际化的人才。那么再有背靠大陆，我相信在座的这个朋友们，可能刚才这个 Chris 和 Simon 提到的讲普通话的问题，对大家可能绝大多数人都不是个问题。那所以就不用说香港的这个人才能够在区域内，能够在中国内地或者是更广阔的市场里去起到的这种作用和发挥的这个机会了。那我觉得这个潜力确实回到我最早说的，这个潜力是无限大的，是有无限多的机会的。但是的确，传统上来说，我们做律师的嘛，就是还是会扎根于某一个这个 jurisdiction 去专注的研究、学习、研究、积累这个司法领域的司法辖区的经验和技能。但是可能现在的确是一个非常好的可以走出去的一个机会。那么不光是说我们现在有大湾区这个考试，我们香港的律师们也可以在大湾区去进一步的去学习其他这个领域、其他辖区的这个司法辖区的这种法律的知识和技能，同时有机会去其他地方去执业，或者是同时在不同的地方去执业。那么这样走出去的机会，其实不光是说在专业的领域内去有一个职业发展的道路，可能更多的是可以打开一个新的世界，可以去了解这个不同的地方它的经济发展的现状是什么，它的未来的市场需求是什么，它对金融科技的这个发展的状态已经到了一个什么样的程度和阶段，我们如何能在这样的一个趋势和浪潮里面找到自己的机会。其实法律人才跨界也不是一个很少见的事情了。现在，其实我相信很多的这个以律师出身、律师背景的这个同行们，很多都已经跨到了其他的领域，可能也甚至我们可以看到很多是做投行、做 banker 的，也有很多是可能去创立一家公司的。就是我觉得这已经是一个非常这个好的例子，就我们从来不需要给自己设这些限制，或者是把自己的这个发展的道路局限于我只是做律师，或者我只在香港做律师，或者我只在大湾区做律师。那所以从我来看的话，借着这样的一个良好的势头，中国市场不断的这个向好的发展的这个趋势，以及这么好的金融科技的基础，那么我相信对于我们在座的，包括整个香港律师这个职业群体来说，其实都会有非常不错的发展机会的。只要大家愿意走出去，愿意去尝试新的东西，那这个未来是无可限量的。
谢谢。那还有一个关于走出去的问题，就想问一下 Chris， 就我们中资的金融机构还有其他机构啊，包括我们律师会也经常强调，我们法律服务也是想走出去。那你对于就是我们今天的话题，以你作为中资券商的法律合规负责人，还有我们律师会的现任的理事，你是有什么看法？
谢谢。首先，其实这个中资企业，中资金融企业，它其实在香港也就是一个金融企业，对吧？那么就像其他的金融企业一样，同样的需要这个我们的这个法务的的参与和支持，包括说中资金融企业来到香港，它很多的这个设立也好，展业也好，用的都是香港的法律。 我们接触的都是香港的律师，本地的律师啊，包括说我们香港自己读香港法律的这个律师，还有包括外国的律师在香港工作的，我们其实接触的非常的多。事实上，企业在当地要发展的好，它是离不开这个法律这一块的。这个所以其实越多的中资企业来香港，他们做的越好，其实对法务来说，这个机会会越多越大。那么本身再加上呢，其实现在也看到有一些中资的金融企业呢，他们也会考虑说，哎，我的视野不光是在看香港，我看的是大湾区啊。那么我们也有很多的这个大湾区的，我们很多香港律师考获了大湾区律师的这个执照本身。那么这个牌照本身是允许了我们香港律师很得天独厚的有一个优势，可以在湾区内去执业。这个其实在其他的世界的这个地区啊，我了解其实不多的。这个机会非常非常难得，尤其是专门是给了我们香港当地的律师的这一个的这个安排，其实对企业来说也是相当的这个重要的。我也经常鼓励我团队里面的律师，我让大家考虑，我们去考啊，我们去学习湾区里面的这个 legal practice 这个市场是怎么样的，能够帮助我们企业把我们的这个职业环境从香港这么一个已经比较成熟的市场，再扩大到一个湾区。另外一个呢，就是金融企业它的本质呢，它其实是在提供这个金融服务。那么我们的对象有很多中国优秀的这个中资企业，实业的这个实业经济方面的这些企业，有新的科技领域的企业。也有很多家办的，就家族办公室的这样的一些客户，甚至是一些高净值客户，他们其实在接下来的一段，或者其实都已经开始了，不是接下来啊，在整个的这个“一带一路”的这样的一个趋势下面呢，他们都有往外走，尤其是在东盟一带的这样的一些投资的需求，落地的需求、融资的需求，甚至是一个金融服务的需求。那这种情况下，也决定了我们的这种企业，它在提供服务的过程当中，不可避免会涉及到很多当地的一些法律。那么我们很多时候是以一个香港律师的视野去跟当地的这个律师合作，那么确保在既符合香港的这个法律，又符合当地的这个法律，所以对香港律师的需求也是很大。那么所以我自己觉得哈，尤其是在我们的国家主席其实也提到哈，一直强调我们的 common law 这个系统是不能动摇哈，这个其实也都提过。所以其实对香港法律甚至是这个 common law 系统的这个需求会越来越大，我自己看到，尤其是对香港律师的这个需求。那么香港本地它也是一个争议仲裁解决的这个相当成熟的一个市场。那么如果在整一个往外走的过程当中，我们多推动这个使用香港的法律那么能够多带给我们香港的这个同行更多的这个机会我觉得这是一个非常好的事情。
谢谢 Chris。那最后留给 Simon 的问题是，我们看到刚才 Chris 跟 Annie 也总结了我们法律市场，香港法律市场未来。那我们一个很关心的问题，法律就业市场的未来你怎么看？
法律就业市场跟这个经济是有关系的，但是呢，虽然可能这两年的经济整体全世界都没那么好了，但是全长远来说呢，也是比较看好的，因为我们看见过去20年呢，这个中国企业呢在香港这个 market 那个占有率也越来越高了，他们提供那个工作机会越来越多。那我觉得这段时间大家先好好准备，把刚才我们提到的那种 skills 先准备好，比如说你的那个语言啊，或者是文化方面的那个准备啊，多一点跟其他已经进入这个国际民企的朋友多聊一下去怎么样？我自己觉得这未来应该是正如这刚才 Chris Annie 说，就是我们其实的能力是很大的，我们香港律师将来那个 market 空间也很大的。 的，就看自己是怎么样去 explore 将来自己的机会。所以我觉得我是比较乐观的。另外就多参加一些 Law Society 的活动，多参加这种的论坛，可以多学一些东西。
最后一点非常重要啊，我们现在刚好是有5分钟的时间，现场有没有朋友想提问？没有的话，Joyce。
刚才 Simon 跟 Chris 分享就关于语言方面的问题嘛，可能我就有个 follow up，就是讲方面就足够呢，还是你一般的 email 或者跟你们内部的沟通写方面也需要吗？然后我们香港学习的都是可能是繁体字嘛，然后还有简体字，那些真的很实在工作上的需要又是怎么样？可以麻烦你分享一下吗？谢谢。
对，你这个问题问得很好的，其实写跟读也是很重要的。比如说我当年在做一个上市公司的那个总监的时候呢，很多的那些公告的嘛，然后那些香港人写出来的中文跟一个内地人写出来的中文还是有点差别的，就看出来是有点差别。所以我自己那年很努力的多看一些内地的那些文章啊，学习一下他们去怎么样写。因为有些时候呢，如果一个传统在完全就是香港读书的人写出来的时候，很多我们的那些董事啊，很多那些高管都是内地人了，他们就是可能就所有中文字都懂，但是呢，抽起来就觉得不知道你在说什么，对吧？所以这个还是很重要的。但是也提到那个简体字跟这个繁体字，其实这个问题不大。以我为例子呢，我本来打字是用拼音的嘛，那用拼音的话打出来，最后就是要简体转繁体或者繁体转简体，也是比较简单的。谢谢。
其实我觉得现在的 AI 都很厉害哦，ChatGPT 也很厉害。其实我自己感觉语言本身它成为一个障碍的这种情况会越来越减轻。这个我觉得其实从我刚来香港工作的时候和现在的香港，不管是律所、律师行里面，还是说 in house 里面，语言的这个影响，我觉得慢慢的在下降。这个 barrier 应该说慢慢在下降，也是因为我们在香港工作的律师，其实他们的这个普通话其实有长足的发展。就我刚来的时候是10几年前啊，这真的是比较难去用普通话去沟通。那现在大家在中环走的时候，你都会听到有内地的同事在用普通话交流，也有我们香港的同事跟内地的同事在用普通话交流。这些我觉得都已经非常常见了。那至于写这块呢，客观来说呢，还是要分看这个是哪一类的这个文件。那么的确是有一些比较核心的一些文件，举个例子啊，我们常说这个中国监管的一些红头文件啊，通过母公司来到我们这里的，那这个你不可能是英文的。而且那些中文呢，的确像 Simon 说的，可能每个字都认识啊，放在一起就不知道他在讲什么。那这个我觉得就不是语言的问题，其实更多是一个文化还有工作习惯的问题，甚至是一个工作背景的问题。那所以语言可能只是一个工具，但工具现在我觉得大家都没有问题，基本上还是背后的这个文化和这个工作习惯。我觉得这个也是通过时间是可以慢慢去累积经验的。
好的，我们还有一点时间是吗？应该很快问一下3位啊。刚才 Annie 讲过跨界的问题，那你们几位也不仅仅是法务的在机构里面也不仅仅是法律顾问，那你们是怎么完成这个跨界的转换呢？
我觉得这个要用时间去慢慢学的。我经历过2段 in-house， 一段去了个太阳能公司，然后太阳能的那个怎么样去投资太阳能，那个电站是怎么样去跟其他人合作，一起把电站建起来等等，这种 business 的东西是慢慢学的。那然后我现在去了个 hedge fund， 因为 hedge fund 很多的那些投资的呢，包括 ISDA 等等的东西，也是重新学起来的。所以我觉得这种的 business 的这种 knowledge 都是 是很重要的。你就是可以多跟你的 business team 多交流，平时也可以看一下相关的书。
其实我还在转啊，这个还没完成转，持续的转。其实这个我觉得不是不是，我觉得不是一个选择，其实是大家面对的一个不可避免的一个话题，对吧？我们做法律的，其实法律可能是一个起点，但是很多的终点并不在法律这个行业当中。过程中我们可能会碰到不同的这个挑战、不同的机会，我们也会去做不同的这个思考。到底我们的这个职业发展的路径是怎么样？我自己个人是从律师转到去做合规，再回来两边都看。那么其实我个人的感觉呢是，当你进入到合规领域以后，其实你会变成一个更好的律师。因为你的这个整一个的思考，你对风险的评估会更全面。那么我相信在座有很多的这个同行，大家其实进到公司里面，多多少少你们的这工作范围或者涉及到的事情都不那么纯粹，只是法律了，对吧？其实大家都一直在转型，包括说可能在领域上会有一个转型，其实在工作的这个方式其实都在转，包括我们的 legal tech， 对吧？我们经常我们内部的法律团队也都在讨论很多，哎，我用这个新的技术怎么去完成我手头的工作？那有很多的这个新的系统或者平台，其实跟法律是没关系的，它更多的是一个文件处理的问题，对吧？数据管理的问题，这些其实大家已经都是在转型，所以我感觉转型是一个恒长的一个不可避免的一个过程，只是说我们要保持的是一个开放的心态，然后呢，学习的这样的一个心态，然后呢，一定要有这个信心啊，我们整个行业是肯定会做得越来越好，发展的是越来越平稳的。
谢谢。
我就说两句啊，我觉得转型对法律人来说不是个问题。这个我们受的是最好的教育，我们在法学院里学的基本的课程就是逻辑思维的能力。其实我们已经掌握了所有的这个跨界的这个核心的本质。我们只要把这个，我们是思路清晰，逻辑非常完整的。那么其实学任何东西都是以这个为基础，或者以这个为起点的。那么我始终认为，只要我们这个行业的精英，只要有这个机会，有这个信心，什么事情都可以做。
谢谢三位，我们时间也差不多，非常感谢三位的参与啊，分享了你们非常宝贵意见，谢谢。
感谢讲者的分享，麻烦留步。我们现在有请律师会副会长汤文龙律师 Roden 代表律师会向讲者颁发纪念品，有请 Roden。谢谢 Roden， 也再次感谢几位嘉宾。We'll now switch back to English for the remaining session of the conference. In the next session, we have invited distinguished IP practitioners and regulators to share how Hong Kong could make use of our robust and transparent IP protection regime and experienced legal service providers to develop into a regional IP trading hub. Our speakers are Mr. Alan Chiu, founder and managing partner, Alan Lan, Ms. Rebecca Low, consultant Gallant, and Mr. Thomas Zhang, Deputy Director of Intellectual Property of the Hong Kong SAR Intellectual Property Department. This session will be moderated by Mr. Arthur Law, General Counsel, Meitu Inc. Please join me in welcoming the panelists to the stage.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Arthur Law. I'm the General Counsel of Meitu Inc., a Hong Kong mainboard listed company. So welcome to the fourth panel discussion session today, which is Advance Your IP Literacy as Hong Kong develops into a regional IP trading center. So as all of you would know that IP is very crucial in driving growth and innovation in today's knowledge-based economy. As Hong Kong sets out to develop into a premier IP trading center in the region, speakers in this session will look into Hong Kong's strengths in terms of legal system, IP regime, and its close link with mainland China, and see how these advantages could be leveraged. So without delay, let me introduce today's speakers to everybody. Our first speaker today will be Mr. Thomas Zhang. Thomas? Thomas is the Deputy Director of Intellectual Property of the Hong Kong Intellectual Property Department. So as a public officer, Thomas has a professional experience in advising the Hong Kong government on and addressing a variety of legal and policy issues, mainly arising from IP legislative exercises covering copyright, trademarks, and patent areas. And today, Thomas sharing a session will mainly focus on the policy and the government incentive level. And the main topic he will be sharing today is called Hong Kong as a Regional Intellectual Property Trading Center. Okay, so that's Thomas, the first speaker. And then the second speaker here we have is Ms. Rebecca Low. Ms. Rebecca Low, give her a round of applause, thank you. So Rebecca has been practicing the law of intellectual property, technology, and media and communications for more than 30 years. And she's a very well-qualified lawyer, I must say, qualified in Hong Kong, California, Singapore, England, and Wales. And she's a notary public and also a China-appointed attesting officer. So today, Rebecca will be sharing on the mainly called the IP asset, which will cover the IP fundamentals, as well as what companies should be doing to protect and maximize their IP asset. And then now we have our third speaker, last but not the least, Mr. Alan Chiu. Alan? Thank you, Alan. Alan is the founder and managing partner of LLM. He specializes in IP, technology, and entertainment matters, and he's an award-winning lawyer, winning over 50 professional awards. And today, Alan will be sharing on practical tips for effective management of IP assets, which will cover the Madrid Protocol, practical tips for IP licensing, IP documentation within a corporate, especially focusing on AI policy. So may I take the opportunity now to invite Thomas to deliver his first sharing session. I think Thomas, each of our speakers have some slides today to share with everybody. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Arthur, for your very kind introduction. Rebecca, Alan, distinguished speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. May I first of all thank the Law Society of Hong Kong for inviting me to join this panel with two IP experts this afternoon for knowledge dissemination as well as experience sharing. It gives me great pleasure to see you all in this afternoon. Well, before I go into the substance of my presentation, I would like to do some management expectation of my presentation. Well, I can assure you that every speaker wishes to offer the audience as many takeaways as possible, but we all appreciate that this is mission difficult, if not impossible, given the constraint of time. It is my humble objective that by the end of my presentation today, you would not only acquire a better understanding of the concept of IP trading, and I would also like to invite you to think about the business opportunity afforded by the government's initiative in developing Hong Kong into an IP trading center, and to think about how best you your firms or even your clients may utilize IP to develop your business strategy in order to enhance your business model, in order to grasp the opportunities ahead for promoting further business growth. Well, without further ado, let me proceed with the substance of my presentation today. To facilitate the understanding of my department, which was established back in 1990, basically the department is responsible for providing responsive and quality registration services for trademarks, patents, and designs, as well as copyright licensing bodies to the public. And the IPD is also the legal and policy advisors for the government for pursuing different types of initiative for promoting IP literacy, as well as, most importantly, IP trading in Hong Kong. And the other very important function is we have to interact with the public, the practitioners, stakeholders, and industries in order to enable them to appreciate the importance of IP and to promote IP literacies amongst the public as well as the society. Well, actually, this short video was prepared back in 2020 when my department was celebrating our 30th anniversary. It actually contains 12 milestones, which I think it will be useful to let you know the path which Hong Kong has gone through for the past years. So allow me to play the short video. In the video, you will appreciate that there are various milestones which Hong Kong has gone through in developing our IP regime. Here is the structure of the Hong Kong government and also the position of IPD. I would like to show that in addition to IPD, there are indeed quite a few policy bureau as well as government department which their duties are closely related to IP. For example, I've highlighted those policy bureaus as well as government department in bold. For example, the Customs and Exiles Department, the department is one of the very core functions or duties of the department is to enforce, to conduct criminal actions against infringement of IP, namely trademarks and copyright. And we also have the Department of Justice, who is the civil advisors of the legislation in Hong Kong. And whenever we wish to enact any piece of IP legislation, we have to work with the DOJ as our very close partner in order to, for example, render the necessary legal advice as well as formulate the relevant draft provisions. In terms of the Policy Bureau, IPD is under the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau. which one of the very important function is to promote IP as well as to draw up the necessary initiative to achieve the purpose. There are two important government bureaus whose functions may also be closely relating to IP is the Innovation Technology Industry Bureau, which is promoting innovation technology in Hong Kong by investing billions of Hong Kong dollars to promote creations of inventions. And also the Cultural, Sports and Tourism Bureau, which is promoting Hong Kong as a cultural exchange center, which would give incentives to stakeholders to generate considerable number of works, typically copyright works in the form of, for example, books, music, television programs, dramas, etc. To give you an idea as to the recent registration figures of the department, I've prepared a table for you. I would like to draw your attention that, well, actually, we have Hong Kong does have considerable number of IP in terms of patents, trademarks, as well as registered designs. And these IPs contains values which can be commercialized and can support the growth of our knowledge economy. It's very important for members of the audience to understand the big picture before understanding the government, the rationale of the government in promoting IP trading in Hong Kong. It is important to note that our motherland, China, also attach great importance to IP these days. And in the National Development Strategy, the Chinese government expressly proclaimed that China is going to be a leading nation in intellectual property rights. And under the national policy, the central government also supports Hong Kong to promote or to develop Hong Kong into the 8 centers. And one of the centers is known as the Regional IP Trading Center. And in fact, the National 14th Five-Year Plan, promulgated in March 2021, expressly or raises the first time national support for Hong Kong to develop into a regional IP trading center. Now, to go into IP trading, I would like members of the audience to bear in mind there are various important elements which actually constitute the overall picture of IP trading. Well, first of all, when we are talking about IP is basically intangible assets comprising, for example, trademarks, copyrights, the designs, registered designs, as well as patents, and even trade secrets are also covered and protected as IP. And it is very important that we have creation and we are able to identify the existence of IP in the first place before the chain reaction takes place. The second very important element, which the government has spent considerable resources in strengthening, is protection of IP. The value of an IP asset essentially comes from the right of the asset owner to exclude competitions, to exclude competitors from using the IP. And such value is capable of generating a measurable amount of economic benefits to its owners as well as users. And so it is also important to make sure that there is sufficient protection of the individual IP rights, which would create or add more or extra value to the intangible assets. And the third element is management of IP rights, because there is really no point to simply register a trademark and then get a registration certificate and then store your certificate in your drawers. That does not actually maximize or utilize the inherent value of intellectual property assets. So right owners, or they may even instruct agents or their lawyers to properly manage their rights. For example, by regularly doing IP audits, or when there is any infringement, they need to take enforcement action as quickly as possible. And the fourth element, of course, in support of IP trading is commercialization. And commercialization actually takes various forms. As we all know, it can take in the form of acquisition, and in acquisition of, for example, a company's assets comprising IP, and it can also be in the form of, for example, licensing, whereas the owners retains the exclusive right of the property, but allows a third party to use the property either on exclusive or non-exclusive basis. And I would also like to draw members of the audience attention that, as I understand, I understand you are all lawyers, private practitioners, or even in-house lawyers, and I can assure you that you can also play a very important role in support of the IP ecosystem, because each of these elements would require professional service in order to enable or to facilitate, for example, creation, protection, management, and commercialization. And as lawyers, you will be able to advise your clients, and you'll be able to help your clients, support your clients in doing different transactions, as well as dispute resolution of IP disputes. We have to recognize the inherent strengths of Hong Kong in promoting Hong Kong as a regional IP trading center, and I've actually identified 4 blocks. First of all, we all agree that Hong Kong has a very sound legal as well as judicial system, and Hong Kong should be proud that we are the only common law jurisdiction actually using English and Chinese as official languages. And our Hong Kong laws, our Hong Kong courts, we have judicial independence, which would give investors as well as IP owners the confidence in our judicial and legal system in getting the dispute resolved. And we have a very solid foundation for the rule of law, namely our law is certain and our law is easily accessible to the public. Second, which is very closely related to our strong legal system, is Hong Kong is maintaining our robust IP protection system. The Hong Kong IP legislation, as well as the legal system, actually meets the highest standard, international standard, set out in the World Trade Organization TRIPS agreement. And the Hong Kong government is committed to enhancing and strengthen our statutory regime from time to time in order to meet the necessary economics and social needs. We have also a very strong and highly developed as well as reputable services industries. And of course, our legal practitioners would take pride of that. Our professionals, whether it's in legal field or not, they are all skilled professionals with knowledge as well as expertise in order to help their clients and advise their clients in various transactions. And many of our practitioners, they have the international perspective as well as the mainland perspective, and they are all proficient in English, Cantonese, as well as Putonghua, which would add value and also enable them to provide comprehensive professional services to clients for their benefits. The 14th five-year plan, in addition to supporting Hong Kong to develop into a regional IP training center, also support Hong Kong to develop into various centers, covering, for example, the international innovation and technology centers. The government, as I've said, has invested billions of dollars in the industries and in the R&D sectors in order to enhance our IP ecosystem, particularly in creating and generating more inventions with commercial values. And the second center is known as the East Meets West Center for International Cultural Exchange. And of course, in promoting our position, we have to diversify our development of our cultural and creative industries in order to reach out to the international markets. And in the process, as I have briefly mentioned earlier, various works or various assets which are capable of being protected by IPs, for example, books, music, movies, they are all intangible assets of cultural and artistic significance. And in doing so, it will also complement our efforts in promoting IP trading. Now, of course, another very important objective or initiative which our colleagues in the Department of Justice is pursuing is promoting Hong Kong as a center for international legal and dispute resolution services in Asia-Pacific region. In Hong Kong, we have established a specialized list in the Court of First Instance, in which judges specialized in IP would be responsible for dealing with IP case with the view to adjudicating the case expeditiously. And in Hong Kong, we also have introduced a number of statutory amendments in order to promote dispute resolution. One of the amendments is the amendments to the arbitration ordinance, which makes it very clear that all IP disputes are arbitrable and IP awards are enforceable in Hong Kong. And there is also collaboration between the mainland in recognizing judgments in Hong Kong as well as in the mainland, and the judgments actually covers IP judgment. The initiative the latest status is that we have passed the necessary ordinance, and the colleagues in the DOJ as well as in the mainland, they are working together in order to prepare the necessary rules in order to implement this initiative as early as possible. We have our opportunities in developing IP trading because Hong Kong now has a role in participating in national and international dual circulation economy. And actually, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, known as the GBA, is also a market of potential because it ranks the second in the top performing science and technology cluster, which generates a number of IP assets, which means that there is indeed a great demand for IP and a great demand for IP services in the region. Given the constraint of time, I would like to briefly introduce the latest initiative of the Hong Kong SAR government in promoting IP trading in Hong Kong. The roadmap was actually set out in the Chief Executive Policy Address last year. And the roadmap basically is divided into three categories. One of them is in enhancing the IP protection regime, which IPD is taking a leading role in advancing these projects. And the second area is capacity building as well as external promotion. Now, in various types of IP, trademarks, copyright, patents, and designs, there are quite a number of initiatives for IPD to press ahead with. In trademarks, we're actually pressing ahead with the preparatory task for implementing the Madrid Protocol to Hong Kong by the central government. We have already enacted the principal ordinance to provide the necessary power to the registrar of trademarks to enact the necessary rules for providing for the rules and procedures and requirements for implementing the systems. And we are actually working very hard with the Central People Government to settle the implementation details before the central government is in the position to extend the application of the international treaty to Hong Kong. Copyright, following the amendment of the Copyright Ordinance by the Copyright Amendment Ordinance 2022, which has come into effect since the 1st of May this year, we are preparing for embarking on the next round of review to make sure that our copyright regime would adapt or would be able to support the growth of our knowledge economy. For patents, since the implementation of the original grant patent system in 2019, which provides a direct route in Hong Kong for applicants to apply for standard patent in Hong Kong, we are actually enhancing the substantive examination capacity under the current regime. At present, we are enlisting the technical support of the Patent Office in China to process patent application, but we have our objective to enhance our substantive examination capacity by increasing the number of patent examiners. Hopefully, it would be increased up to 100 so that the Intellectual Property Department, the Patent Registry, will be able to conduct substantive examination by 2030. And next year, we will be starting another very important project for our Registered Designs Ordinance, which was enacted back in 1997 without major amendments or without any major review. Our target is to start a review of our registered design regime and to study the issues, and as well as identifies the issues which requires updating, and we will strive to commence a public consultation the year after in terms of the way forward to enhancing the regime. Now, for capacity building, the policy address also set out the target that we have to provide IP training to different industries across the board in the current 5-year term of the government. And one of the major programs which IBD is implementing is the IP Manager Scheme, which we would organize training course for example, different industries for the SME to attend the course, to let them appreciate the importance of IP and the potential value of IP, and to let them have some of the practical tips in order to manage, protect, as well as to commercialize their IP. And at the same time, we are also collaborating with our partners, the Department of Justice, in order to promote IP mediation and IP arbitration as an alternative dispute resolution, which provides an alternative route to resolve dispute instead of just conventional litigation. And we are also very happy to have the support given by the Law Society for Hong Kong in organizing or in arranging for the IP-free consultation services, where we have already increased the duration of consultation and increased the number of legal advisors early this year to provide a free consultation session to SME to answer their inquiries about IP management or protection in their individual cases. And for external promotion, I would like to highlight a very important event, a flagship event, which the Hong Kong SAR governments jointly organized with the TDC, the Trade Development Council, as well as with the design centers, Hong Kong design centers, to promote IP in the international community. And the event is known as the Business of Asia, or Business of IP Asia Forum, which is going to be held on the 7th and 8th this year, with the theme of IP and innovation, steering new economic growth. And at the same time, we have also a number of programs for the youth where we would, for example, send our ambassador for IPs to local schools to enable our young people to understand more about IP rights, the opportunities which Hong Kong offer, and so that they know it as a means of, for example, stimulating their creation mindset and to provide a career path for them to pursue in the IP community. Well, I'm really sorry that I have to rush through the topics because I have to allow sufficient time for two legal experts to speak to you, to share their tips in protecting or in commercializing IP. And of course, after the presentation, I'm happy to take any question from the floor. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Thomas. So now, Rebecca, if I may invite you now to share your session with the audience. Thank you.
Good afternoon, panelists and fellow lawyers. Today, I'm going to share with you some information about the importance of IP as an asset of the company. Now, first of all, let's take a look at this chart. It tracks the components of S&P 500 companies, all right? And of course, as you know, S&P 500 companies are all US companies. But if you take a look at this chart, tracing from 1975 all the way up to 2020, you will realize that the IP component in the companies have grown significantly. In 1975, only about 17% of a company's assets or the capital value is in relation to intangible assets. By 2020, 90% of the company's capital value is in relation to intellectual property asset. And because IP is such an important asset, I think this gives you all very good reason to understand more about IP. Now, some people may have the misconception that IP is only for technology companies, or IP is only for big companies. But actually, IP is prevalent in all businesses, whether you're big, you're small, whether your business is in relation to technology or finance or food and beverage, anything, actually anything, all right? Now, of course, we all have company names and logos. We have work products, for example, work manuals, etc. We have technology, know-how, company lists, business goodwill, etc. All of these are prevalent in all companies. And for the IP lawyer, we apply the laws of IP, namely trademark, copyright, design, patent, trade secrets, and passing off to protect these assets. Now, may I spend just 20 minutes to take a look at the IP asset? First of all, trademarks. Trademark can be a registered right. It can also be unregistered rights. However, of course, registration will give you a lot of more benefits in terms of enforcement. It protects brands and names mainly. Registered design, or in other jurisdictions, they may be called other names, such as design patents, etc. They are registered rights. In other words, if you don't register, you don't get protection. And it protects the appearance of products. Copyright is a right that does not require registration for enforcement. However, in many jurisdictions, there are voluntary registration of copyright. Copyright mainly protects original works, literary works, musical works, photography, films, sound recordings, and even the performers' performances. Patents are registered rights. In other words, again, if you don't register, you don't enjoy the protection of a patent. And it mainly protects new inventions. Trade secrets, of course, as the name implicates, it is not a registered right, all right? Because you put it in the shelf, lock it up as a secret. So you will not be putting it up for registration. It protects confidential information, such as customer lists, market strategy, etc. And all of these are actually rights that can be used. Now, how can you make use of IP for a company? First of all, IP differentiates your business from your competitors. It helps you maintain competitive edge, keep competitors off the market, as well as bring income through collaborations such as joint ventures, all right, licensing, franchising, etc. IP also supports businesses in getting funds for development. Now, from the SME to the big companies, they all go through various stages of development. And throughout these stages, IP is a very good support. When you're a startup, IP helps you apply for government funding and get incubation support. You can also seek investors or venture capitalist funding because you have a good IP portfolio. You can seek bank loans, all right? And you can use your IP as collateral. And finally, you can also raise funds through listing. And may I just mention that there are special listing rules for biotech companies as well as specialist technology industries. IP also supports business growth. IP can be used for yourself, all right, to oust your competitor, to maintain a competitive edge, or you can use it to collaborate with others. And through such collaboration, licensing, and franchising, you can quickly expand to new business areas and new territories. You can increase market share very quickly, increase income, and use as a chip to negotiate for settlement of disputes. You can engage in cross-licensing so as to get desired technology that you are not able to develop yourself, but you want, so you can trade. You can also attract strategic partners with your IP portfolio. Now let's take a look at some of the big M&A deals which are driven by IP. These are just some random selection, all right? Facebook acquiring WhatsApp, because at that time, they are one of the easiest to use instant messaging technology. Dow Chemicals acquiring DuPont because of the cancer treatment portfolio. Disney acquiring 21st Century because of the movie library. And Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard because of the video game library. Now, let's also take a look at China. On the left are inbound investments into China. And on the right are outbound target companies. Now, for inbound investment, for the top 50 deals in the years 2019 and 2020, in the 2 years, the top 50 deals, the first jurisdiction, the top jurisdiction that invests the most number of deals is US, and Hong Kong ranks the second with 11 deals amongst the 50. And when it comes to outbound target companies, for the top 50 deals, Hong Kong ranks number 1, 11 deals. So you can see how significant Hong Kong is, playing a role in the investment, inbound or outbound, relating to China and connecting with the world. So for China inbound M&A within the past 2 years, in the years 2019 to 2020, the top 50 deals involves financial services, software and services, healthcare, and professional services. And you can see a lot of these industries involve the use of technology. As for outbound M&A, the top 50 deals involves metal and mining, software and services, healthcare, food and beverage, and energy. Again, many of these involve technology, because even though on the surface, for example, food and beverage, you may not link it up with technology, but actually there is a lot of use of technology for delivery, for the handling of logistics. Technology is now everywhere for the efficient operation of a company. So as in-house lawyer or as outside counsel advising companies, you have to pay attention to intellectual property. So the following part of my presentation relates to what companies should do to protect and maximize their IP asset. The most important and foremost is to develop an IP strategy, to establish policies and procedures relating to the creation, identification, protection, and reporting of all matters relating to IP, and to apply appropriate protection mechanism. For example, for IP rights that have to be registered, you register them, all right? For IP rights that can be registered or can be protected without registration, you have to decide whether or not it is more beneficial to spend the cost to protect it by registration. You also have to establish a system to keep records for the protection of rights that are not registered. For example, copyright, trade secrets. You will, as well as business goodwill, all right? You have to prove such rights by using your documentation retained in the company. You also have to establish a system to keep trade secrets confidential. Whatever information that is already open to the public, you cannot protect it by trade secret law. You also have to establish guidelines for IP management and enforcement, and conduct periodic IP audit to ensure that the IP strategy is in alignment with business goals and development needs. For example, let's just take a look at a watch company, for example. Previously, they may be making mechanical watches. They have lots of designs for watches, mechanical watches. But suddenly, they changed to make smart watches. So completely different strategy will have to be applied. So for all IP in-house counsel or external counsel advising companies, you will have to help your clients recognize what is meaningful to them and then fine-tune the IP strategy from time to time. Now, IP portfolio management is also terribly important. It means good record keeping. For registered rights, of course, you have to keep good record so that you will timely renew and pay maintenance fees and do not allow the registered rights to lapse unless you want to let it lapse. And also you have to keep good records to protect unregistered rights. You also have to keep contracts with employees, licensors, licensees, and collaborators very tidily so that you can look for such information very easily. You will also have to formulate strategy or policy with regard to IP enforcement and defense. You have to enforce your rights against infringers, and you have to constantly monitor the marketplace to see whether there are infringers. You also have to defend infringement claims by third parties. However, you can minimize risk by clearance searches before launching new products. For contracts review and negotiation, pay special attention to the IP provision to ensure that the IP clause protects the company's IP interests. You also have to make arrangement for, your relationship with the other party to the contract before, during, and after the contract. So what are the rights of the parties before the contract? How do you preserve them? What are the rights of the parties when new inventions, for example, are created during the contract period? And what will happen after the parties part their ways? You have to allocate responsibility for costs associated with IP creation, registration, maintenance, enforcement, and defense. And you also have to consider dispute resolution mechanism with the company's business and IP in mind. So for example, if your company just do local Hong Kong business, then you can consider just using Hong Kong law, all right, and litigation before the Hong Kong courts, because that's pretty much the cheapest way of enforcement. However, if your business crosses the border, then you will have to consider what would be the best means to resolve disputes and make the judgment or the decision enforceable. So you may have to consider arbitration under such circumstances. And then you also have to take several proactive measures, such as keeping updated on IP developments. You also have to train your employees so that they are aware of IP and the importance of protecting IP as well. Now, Thomas just mentioned that there is an IP management, is it IP manager training program, right? So actually, companies can send their staff to attend the program and let the IP department train your staff so that they know more about IP and so that they can perform well. And finally, you can collaborate with IP Council so as to leverage on their knowledge and experience. So, I mean, for all lawyers, we know that we can't be jack of all trades. There are people who specialized in IP laws. So you look for those experts and work with them so that they can help you protect your company's IP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So now, Alan, may I now invite you to do your sharing session? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Chiu, managing partners of Elaland. I also call it Elaland because it's actually a firm founded by me and my fellow co-founder Ella, who is also here, together 7 years ago. We are a full-service law firm, but with an award-winning practice in IP, entertainment, and media and technology. Today, I'm going to talk about practical tips because we have talked about policies, about how the government extends the initiatives to protect IP. We have talked about, Rebecca has talked about the IP assets, the natures, and some tips for corporates to manage an IP, but boil down to some really day-to-day work. What are we going to do? I don't have time to go through my bios and our offices, but you can see from the map here, I would say many of the law firms are actually doing the same thing, especially for IP firms, because IP is an international concept. We used to work with MNCs to help them to navigate the difficult waters in Hong Kong and mainland China, but now we are actually more to help the PLC clients to get out of China. So talking about IP is always about global. For example, our firm's name, Elaland or Elaland, actually is a name coined by Ella and myself together, and representing the two of us and also representing the firm. But incidentally, actually, this is a name of a former king in Sri Lanka. So I'm afraid that if I want to expand our practice to Sri Lanka, we are not going to get the mark registered there. So do your trademark search if you want to do global business. And I think every single business is you now want to be global, because with the proliferation of internet, Web 3.0, everyone is doing things globally. So in Hong Kong, what is the benefit? What is actually happening here? We are having Madrid Protocol. Thomas has just mentioned that. It is an international treaty allowing Hong Kong people and Hong Kong companies applying for trademark registration worldwide, covering up to 130 jurisdictions through WIPO. So basically one set of filing fees, basically just tick, 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 and all done. And of course, your work is all done. And most of the work will be done by the local registries as well. But it's just simply a single step. But before that, because trademark rights is largely territorial, each and every owner has to file in each and every single jurisdiction before that. So this is the typical workflow. You don't need to really have a detailed memories of this. But what I want to say is after you have filed, the IPD will actually do the basic formality checks and all this stuff, and it will go through WIPO. And WIPO will actually send the papers to the designated IP offices. For example, if you want to extend to US, to the other some other jurisdictions, then they will do the same for you. But of course, it's not as simple as such, because one thing I have to highlight is you can see that there's a word basic mark. Basic mark means the basic registrations in Hong Kong. If your basic registration can't go through in Hong Kong, the entire chain collapses. So, oops, technical problems. I've changed the slides, but thank you for waiting for that. But due to time constraint, I'll keep it up. And I'm sure that Law Society can share the slides with you. And you can also email me and look up for my contact. So yes, here you go. Basic mark on the right-hand side or top right-hand corner. Basic mark, you have to get it registered first. Otherwise, the whole chain of international registration will collapse. So that is the benefit, because Hong Kong is relatively small. The number of marks involved, although we are having more and more trademark applications, but when compared to China, our numbers is still small. So the chance of getting your mark registered in Hong Kong is actually a lot higher, or the chance of not actually getting your mark rejected in Hong Kong is actually you have a slow chance of getting your mark rejected. So going through Hong Kong is actually the right thing to do. In the past, many mainland companies actually, they don't do international registrations in China because they are aware of the risk. What they do is they set up a company in Singapore and then go through the IR channel. But now they can go through us, Hong Kong. Sorry, the slides, okay. Yeah, but one thing I have to highlight, mutual destinations between mainland and Hong Kong are not allowed. That means that we still have to, if we file an IR in Hong Kong, we still have to file locally in China. Because we are one country, we are actually under WIPO, we can only designate other foreign jurisdictions. So here are some tips for cost, efficiency, whether you have in-house IP capability. These are all the key factors for you to decide whether you should go through this new IR channel or using the previous national filing channel. And we are not yet having all this implemented. I think Thomas can tell you more. The IPD is going down to doing the logistics, the fee arrangement, and getting approval from the central government right now. And it is expected to be launched probably later this year or the first quarter next year. IP commercialization, I don't have time to go through all these, but these are the key concepts when you talk about IP commercializations. Licensing, assignment, franchising, audit, due diligence, valuation. In particular, I would like to highlight if you are acquiring a company or you are going to be listed in Hong Kong, you should do the IP due diligence, audit, or valuation as early as possible, because that really affects the value of the company. And I've been assisting a lot of IPO teams of different firms because they can't go through the stock exchange requirements because they got stuck on IP. So these are the basic terms. I know probably in-house and also most lawyers like checklists, and these are the checklist items which you must have, or actually the basic ones you need to have in the licensing arrangement. Something you may not have thought about, for example, right to sublicense, how deep you can sublicense, the layer of sublicensees. Why this bothers you? Because if you have many sublicensees, that means that you may lose the control. Derivative works post-termination, I would highlight that post-termination is a key thing, because many, actually the business people, they usually focus on how good the future is, how good our collaboration is. But as in-house lawyers, you focus on the risk. You always say something bad or actually discouraging them to do the deal. But for post-termination, they have to go for it anyway. So what can you do and what should you do? At least give them some protection there. Put more sort of provisions or measures for post-termination arrangement. For example, like return or destroy the confidential information, cease using the IP, and actually in most jurisdictions, IP licensing has to be recorded with the registry. Do we have to cancel the recorder? Yes, you may need to do that. So these are the very practical ones that you may need to consider in IP licensing. I would like to save my time for IP documentation because, as Rebecca has mentioned, when we talk about IP, it's not just about registrations. You can see from the list here, there are a whole lot of corporate documents that may touch on IP, the control, ownership, validity, use, or sort of limitations of IP. And these are the key ones. Of course, there are a lot more. For example, if you have a settlement agreement for an infringement actions, you may have a trademark coexistence agreement. These all go to that list. So no matter you do an IP audit for your own company or do an IP due diligence for another company, try to look for all these sort of documents. But I would like to highlight the last one, AI policy, because probably not that many people have been talking in for AI policy. Hong Kong court, actually US court, and many courts have already been using, or actually US court is penalizing lawyers who use AI for giving inaccurate information. What are the uncertainties here? So AI, of course, everyone knows confidentiality. You are leaking, or you may be leaking your company's confidential data or personal data, but actually there's more. What about if you are creating the work through AI, ChatGPT, Midjourney, whatever, you name it, does copyright subsist? Or even if copyright subsists, do you own the copyright or just part of it? Or you don't know how the AI come for this sort of AI generated product. So is that infringing or infringing someone's copyright or trademarks, or who should be liable? I think an AI policy would help. And these are the very quick pointers about the AI policy. It's not very exhaustive, but I would say that's the very fundamental basic stuff. First of all, with the license terms of the AI tools, because that contains usage term and IP ownership terms. And one thing I would like to highlight, ChatGPT, you are not allowed to use it in Hong Kong because you need to use it through VPN. But when you use through VPN, that means that you may be breaching the terms and conditions of ChatGPT. When you breach the terms and conditions, all the provisions do not apply, maybe. So the IP ownership, even if that or the IP ownership vests on you, the user. But at the end of the day, no, that's not. Anonymize the data because it's confidentiality and personal data protections. Alert your staff that AI generated product may result in bias, discrimination, unethical, inaccurate, and illegal outcomes. So you need to exercise good judgment, or your staff have to. Use AI only to assist with your work, not to replace the intellectual input and efforts. Why? Because IP protections offers to those who put in efforts in creating the work. If you are not creating, why give you the IP? So at least you should have to use your brain to give instructions. Don't ask the AI, oh, copy that particular piece of article. I want 100% copy. No, that's definitely not. First, the AI tool is infringing. Second, you are authorizing the infringement. You have to be liable anyway. And you are the employer, you as employer will be liable too. And if you're using in the employment context or actually making money, commercial context, that may be a criminal offense. So you can see that how important the AI policy can be. And I have some tips. The second last bullet point, give specific instructions. Avoid copying. Why specific instructions? The more instructions you give, the more intellectual input you are giving. That means you may be classified as an author or at least a co-author, so that you at least, as a co-author, you at least have some rights to use it, or at least you own part of it. So that's as important. Of course, at the end, state clearly, ask all the staff, if you are using ChatGPT, tell me that you are using that. So at least you as in-house lawyer, you can manage the risk. And these are the repeated steps for about managing IP portfolio. Be involved from the very beginning to review, enforce, and I don't want to repeat all these, and I hope you enjoyed these sessions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, thank you, Thomas, Rebecca, and Alan for a very insightful sharing session. I am conscious of time, that we are 5 minutes overrun, and also the fact that everybody here sat through 2 panel discussion sessions. If I may suggest, for those people on the floor who have questions, maybe you can reach out to either Thomas, Rebecca, or Alan, like privately when we have the kind of 25 minutes now, a sharing session outside, just mingle and have a chat. I think, Robert, that's the best course, right? No objections, right? Okay, then thank you everybody for your patience. And yeah, so please feel free to reach out to Thomas, Rebecca, or Alan during the recess. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, Rebecca, Thomas, and Arthur. May I ask you to remain on the stage as the Law Society would like to present you a souvenir? May we invite our Vice President, Mr. Roden Tong, again to proceed to the stage and present the souvenirs to our panelists. Roden, please. And for the audience, we'll now take a short break before we move to the last session of today's conference. Light refreshments are served in the foyer and room S222. Please help yourself, and please also take some time to navigate and explore our sponsors' booths outside in the foyer, and hope you'll find some helpful and interesting digital solutions that may support your practice and also to enable you to be the super connector of your companies. We'll resume at 4:30 p.m. I'll see you later after the break. Welcome back. Hope you all feel refreshed for the final session of today's conference. Hong Kong has always been an ideal place for companies to go listed, but the pandemic had not been kind to the global economy, including that of Hong Kong's IPO market. As everything starts to return to its place, Hong Kong strives to become the world's top listing destination once again. We are honored to have gathered a panel of experienced speakers representing a regulator, the financial sector, and the legal profession in private practice to share with us what Hong Kong, and in particular in-house lawyers, need to do to ensure the city is ready for the revival of the IPO market. Our speakers are Ms. Christina Bao, Managing Director, Co-Head of Sales Marketing, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited. Mr. David Chang, Managing Director, Head of Asia Corporate Finance, Bank of America Securities, and Ms. Benita Yu, Senior Partner, Slaughter & May. Mr. Alex Au, Director, General Counsel, Corporate and Investment, Link-REIT, will moderate this session. I shall hand the stage over to Alex and his panel. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for returning. I see a lot of audiences coming back. We were worried for a bit that for the last session, people will probably have run away for the day. But given the attractiveness of our speakers and the importance of the topic that we'll be covering, so hopefully we'll give you a very meaningful hour to go. Very happy to be returning this year. Last year, I moderated a session of this in-house lawyers conference as well. Last year it was a bit weird because it was hybrid. I was moderating. I was the only one sitting on the stage with the speakers joining online. It was pretty weird. So really happy now that we can have a physical, discussion like now. Topic for today: gearing up for IPO market revival. Hong Kong has long been a leading listing destination until the pandemic has upended our financial market. Now that we're trying to get back on track, how does the market look like now? This is what we want to look into. And what can we do to capitalize on this, hopefully upcoming IPO market revival. And what can we do to better help our businesses from the capital market perspective? So these are the topics that we would like to cover today. Speakers, as introduced just now, I probably would not repeat. You can read from the bio in your pamphlet, but I'm very proud to be sitting together with professionals and experts from different areas. A representative from our legal industry, from our regulator, from Hong Kong Stock Exchange, who just released a very great result today. Congratulations, Christina, and also David, representative from the banking industry. So I think to start our panel discussion, I would like to propose that we begin with revisiting and familiarizing ourselves with the Hong Kong listing regime and some historical reforms. And in this respect, I mean, who can be the better person to tell us all about these than Benita, whom I believe most of us in this room already know as our capital market guru in the legal industry. So without further ado, I will hand over the stage to Benita, please.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think we'd like to start with looking at some slides. And in relation to that, what I wanted to say is basically Hong Kong's success as a world-class financial center is in large part attributable to our thriving stock market in Hong Kong. And I think the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has done so much in developing the listing regime over the years in order to enable us to remain competitive, to attract listings here, and at the same time finally balanced against investor protection. And so that is actually also a very important element for investors' confidence in us. So looking at first of all, the history of really where we've been through, I'd like to start with the first slide, which talks about really all the reforms that we have actually been making over the years. So you recall that, and I think many of you would know, say, if you want to list in Hong Kong, there are some financial requirements that you need to meet. And so everyone would be talking about, do you have a profit track record in Hong Kong? And a profit track record means you need to have profit to list in Hong Kong, right? And so this is the traditional starting point, and we've been practicing that for a long time. You need to have profits to list in Hong Kong. But you'll be pleased to see we've actually gone very far from that point in time when we first started, which is that it was then possible to list loss-making company, but having big market caps. And further, in 2018, you may recall the wonderful new economy companies listing regime that we brought about, or we saw, where biotech companies were now allowed to list without any revenue under Chapter 18A. And you also have the overseas issuers coming back for a second listing, giants like Alibaba under Chapter 19C. And at the same time, we started allowing companies with weighted voting rights to list here as well, and provided that certain criteria can be fulfilled. And then further to that, in 2022, you recall we had the SPAC regime introduced. These are the special purpose acquisition companies that came through after the huge success that one saw in the States. Again, non-revenue companies. And lastly, and not least, and of course you remember this one because it's only just happened, that we've now got a new Chapter 18C for specialist technology companies. And so why are these so good? Now, just going through really some basic stuff, which I think most of you would know. So if your company wants to list, what does it need to do? And your first question, as in-house counsel to them, is, are we making profits, right? So that's the easiest way to list. So if you're making profits, and by that I mean for the last financial year, 35 million Hong Kong dollars, and then for the first 2 financial years in the 3-year track record period, a combination of 45 million, then you are able to list, at least meet the track record criteria. There'll be other requirements, but that is the key. So, but if you say, look, but we're not making profits, or the profits are not enough, then what? Then, as I said just now, develop the market cap test. So long as you're big enough, And so long as you're making revenue of more than 500 million Hong Kong dollars in the last financial year, and if you're big enough, you can list. So how big is big? Big is where your market cap is more than 4 billion Hong Kong dollars. Then you can list, even if you're loss making, right? Now, if you say, well, I'm not as big, but I'm quite big, I'm more than 2 billion Hong Kong dollars in market cap. Yes, you can still list, but there's an additional criteria financially, which is that you need to have enough cash flow, which is an aggregate of 100 million Hong Kong dollars over the last 3 years. So has that worked? Now, if you look at this chart, you see that over the 5 years before 2022, when we looked at the reforms again, most companies listed via the track record, the profit track record, the blue bar chart here. And therefore, people who were able to use the market cap alternative tests weren't that many. And in fact, the middle one, which is a 2 billion market cap one, was quite rarely relied on. The 4 billion market cap one was more relied on. But maybe is it not enough to attract? And the reason is all these still require revenue. If you have no revenue, you can't come under any of these tests. Now, back then, there were still some narrowly defined places where you can actually come under to get listed without revenue. One would be the project companies, so toll roads and so on. So it was for a while quite popular to list these toll roads, and they won't have revenue, but they were gathering money to build a toll road. The other one is mineral companies under Chapter 18, but that's very specialized. And so unless you are really into those things, you can't list. Now, in 2018, as I mentioned, so the market reforms were catering for new economy companies. So we got these biotech companies, which were non-revenue, non-profit making companies. And also, as I said, the secondary listings of overseas issuers were allowed. And again, these might not need be earning any revenue. And so we opened up our possibilities to the outside world. And of course, we also had the SPACs. Now, has it been enough? Then if you look at this chart, we realize maybe not. Because since 2018, when we had the reforms, and looking forward over the years, you'd see Hong Kong attracting how many companies in the tech space to list? It's not a lot. If you look at China, if you look at US, in terms of the red side, that's the number of listings, and on the right side, the market cap, we've fallen absolutely short of what these other markets were able to achieve in attracting the listings of good high-tech companies. So this is the background to why there was this further launch of the specialist tech companies. And interestingly, these cover various categories. But what I'm happy to mention is that while these very much overlap with the Starboard categories for specialist tech listings in Shanghai, we went beyond. Those in red on this slide are those that the Hong Kong Stock Exchange have gone beyond what the current categories are in Starboard. Metaverse, food and agriculture, tech. These are what we added on to allow companies to list here. And the other thing is the exchange is open-minded. If you've got a specialist tech, but it might not really fit into these, you can still go and talk to the exchange. I think they're very open to discussing whether those could be allowed to be listed. And as I said, no revenue is required for these, provided that is big enough in terms of the valuation. So the market cap needs to be more than $10 billion. And that's already a reduced number compared to the consultation suggested, but it is a fine balance, again, to be achieved between allowing good companies to list and investor protection. Now, you might say, well, I'm already listed, so what's in this for me? Well, never stop thinking, because you can think about a spin-off for your company. And a lot of times people want to do spin-off because it will actually unlock the valuation in a particular business segment that's otherwise diluted by other business segments in the company. And doing a spin-off would actually release that and increase the value of the business segment for the listco. And you may know about the fact that there's a well-trodden path under Practice Note 15 of the listing rules to allow you to apply for a spin-off. And the exchange would focus on whether what's being left in the company after the spin-off is enough to continue to warrant a listing. with sufficient operations and assets. And the other thing is that obviously the delineation between the spun-off business and the remaining business need to be properly done, that the two sides are done, are operating independently, operationally and management-wise. And lastly, also you can think about listing elsewhere to top up your listing in Hong Kong, and that can actually give you a lot more exposure as well. Like we helped SMIC, not as a PLC incorporated company, but they managed to list in China by creating a subset of their share class called RMB shares, and just have those shares listed in China. So this has started a new structure where you can actually have an offshore company listed in China. And of course, there are recent, interesting dual listings like Ferretti, having done their listing in Hong Kong, are also going for a dual listing and are listed, I think, in Italy now. So all in all, a lot of possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benita. And I think it really helps, us to set the scene of our discussion, knowing about the background, our historical reform, including the latest 18C reform. Let's now turn into what's currently happening in the market. The Hong Kong market, I think it would be a good time to, can I invite representative from our exchange, Christina, to help us a bit about, the current market in Hong Kong. We can see that, after the past 3 years, the IPO market in Hong Kong kind of warmed up a bit with the recent market pickup towards the end of the second quarter. What do you see as the observed opportunities and challenges coming into the second half this year and into next year?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and also thank you, Benita, for the introduction of all these listing reforms that we carry forward in the past few years, and indeed, actually, that has provided a lot of I would say incentives and also encouragement to the market, so that not just the traditional economy like consumer or real estate or the infrastructure, right, that we have seen. Sort of booming in Hong Kong, say between 2012 and more recently is the new economy that really occupies the IPO space of Hong Kong. So in the past 5 years, if you look at the aggregate IPO fundraise on Hong Kong Stock Exchange, you can see that 65% of the IPO fundraise actually went to the new economy names, right? So if you talk about Hong Kong, trading velocity on a daily basis, now you're really talking about a much higher turnover contributed by the names like Alibaba, Meituan, along with the Tencent and all these new economy names. But looking at, probably starting from 2022, the global IPO market has been, under a lot of challenges, mostly due to the rising interest rates, the, inflation, expectations and so on. So as we all know, right, the cost of funding has become a lot, more expensive. And that actually, impacts the IPO market in a way that has not been, seen very, lately. That is, interesting because again, if you look at the cost of funding, you kind of question the valuation of especially the growth stocks, right? So the growth stocks actually is a story kind of is like, on a annual basis, my growth could be, like 20% to 50%, even 100%. So if the cost of funding is relatively, well maintained, that gives you a relatively high valuation, right? But now that the cost of funding has become like 5% in terms of the IRR, it could be even higher, right? So in that sense, with the volatility of the revenue or the cash flow in those growth stocks, it actually impacts very severely to the valuation of these growth stocks, which presents a new challenge for especially the new economy names, because these companies are well known for their growth stories, right? So that's actually is what's happening, globally, not just in Hong Kong. But even in 2022, when time was so, difficult, we managed to complete, 90 IPOs, in 2022, which is not bad, right, globally, because if you look at the US market, look at the UK market, or the general, EU market, the number is much slower. smaller, right, in comparison. And the fundraise actually ranked, top 3, among the top 3. And the top 1, not top 2 is apparently Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. And even in the first half of 2023, if you look at the total fundraise for IPO, right, globally, it's something like $75 billion in the first 6 months, and then 35 billion was contributed by Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. So what I'm saying is that the IPO market is actually changing, and is actually changing in a pace that's probably not seen before. And a lot of it has become a lot more domestic. It's not just the Asia market. If you look at the top ranking exchanges globally, you could see names that you have never seen before. It's like the Abu Dhabi Exchange, right? It's like the Indonesia Stock Exchange, and so on. So what's changing is that indeed people are becoming a less risk on. So they're really looking for a home market that is more secure in terms of IPO sort of completion. And Hong Kong's advantage is that we provide the kind of liquidity that the domestic market can never provide, right? So the global institutional investors, the retail and the institutional investors from mainland China through Stock Connect, these are the investors we are able to provide to the corporates that are listed in Hong Kong. So, but now that we do see that there is a mismatch in terms of the global demand for China assets, and there's also a sort of a mismatch in terms of whether or not the domestic investors are happy to take on some for example the U.S. investors or even European or the Singapore, right? The investors sitting in Singapore or Middle East, are they happy to get more exposed to like a foreign asset these days, right? So that's actually the challenge, and that we have to kind of become a lot more, first of all, flexible, right, in terms of our practices. And second, I think it's also more diversified and more kind of a multi-pronged, right? Because we couldn't be like the one-trick pony that we only can support the Chinese companies to list in Hong Kong, but we are also here to support a lot of the global names, right, to potentially list in Hong Kong, and also to provide accessibility for a lot of the mainland investors to access global assets. So starting from even 2018, right, we've seen a lot of the spin-off listings, not just from China to the other places, but it's more like global names are sort of spinning off their assets into China, into Hong Kong to list. So the examples include Budweiser, right, and Nissin Food, and all these names. So a lot of them have been quite successful, but coming to this year, I want to, actually I was sharing with David that we're opening office in London, in New York. We already have office in Singapore. So trying to be global, has to be multiple ways, and we're trying to be, there for the market, and then try to capture the opportunities in different manners. And then I want to also stress that in terms of sectors, we still see a lot of interest from the corporates, right? The demand is still there. Demand for capital raise is still there. It's just the demand for kind of getting more exposed in this capital market for IPO is kind of subdued at this moment, but it's work pick up, and we already see like over 100 active filings on the exchange. So that actually indicates interest for consumer, for EVs, for ESG related sectors, the metal minerals and so on. And then of course the biotech and the healthcare, all these names are still quite relevant to Hong Kong market, and Hong Kong market can still provide like a very strong competitive edge to support them to keep growing and to be a lot more competitive globally.
Right, thank you very much. I think both Christina and Benita, you've mentioned about kind of comparing, what different exchanges can offer. In this respect, can I maybe ask for your opinion on, what are the key areas that potential issuers would consider when they consider a listing, whether to go to Hong Kong, Shanghai Stock Exchange, or elsewhere? Can I maybe direct this first to David? I mean, from your perspective as a corporate finance advisor, as an investment banker, what do you usually advise potential issues to look into? And then maybe afterwards, can I invite Benita to also share with us how you advise clients in this respect?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think this is a very common question. So when an issuer come to us and say, you know, which venue should I consider for listing my company? I think there are 4 buckets of factors that they typically look at. I think the first one is regulatory requirements. I think Benito already, you know, lay out, you know, the regime of Hong Kong Exchange. And they also consider the vetting process. Overall, I think compared to other major international exchange, I think Hong Kong tend to be slightly more stringent than other exchange in both aspects. But having said that, you know, given that our goal is to attract high quality like companies to list in Hong Kong, I can see a good reason to set a higher bar than other exchanges. And the second regulatory aspect is the post-listing requirement and compliance costs. On the requirement, I think Hong Kong sort of compare on par with other major exchange. On cost, indeed, Hong Kong, you know, compare more favorably with many major exchange, particularly US. In US, you know, they have like quarterly financial disclosure practice. They have spend also requirement. They also have a high litigation exposure. So all this, you know, Hong Kong actually compare much better than other exchange on post-listing. The second bucket of things are comparable company and valuation. On comparable companies, I think the Hong Kong exchange is very matured. We already have a lot of company coming from different sectors to list on Hong Kong exchange. But having said that, you know, for the very highly innovative, you know, business model or highly innovative, you know, companies, based on historical data, the US tend to be front running the Hong Kong slightly on this aspect. But having said that, you know, Hong Kong Exchange has a very good track record in attracting this sort of company come back to list in Hong Kong, create a cluster, as seen in the online gaming sector, education sector, biotech sector. Even though we sort of missed out like in the first batch, but eventually we sort of like catch up, you know, quite successfully. And in terms of valuation, well, as a matter of fact, you know, when a company do their valuation or investor do their valuation, as an underwriter, we typically guide them to look at global comps, regardless of, you know, the listing venue. But in reality, an issuer sometimes find it easier to sell their stories and fetch a higher valuation if they choose to list in a venue with more comparable company and more investor familiarity with the business and high valuation. I think so far, you know, you look at like 2023 price earning multiple. I think US has been outperforming all other markets, and US is now trading as between 21 to 37 times PE compared to Hang Seng Index of 10 times. And the third thing they look at is aftermarket liquidity. Hong Kong is very liquid, you know, compared to many exchange, except for US. I think in terms of average daily trading volume as a percentage of market, US still perform, you know, slightly better than Hong Kong. And the last one is geopolitical risk. I think many issuers nowadays also factor this into their consideration. And for many Chinese issuers, they basically shy away from US market already because of the geopolitical, you know, uncertainty that they perceive.
And I'd like to cut it a different way. So everything David said is so valid. I'd like to look at each jurisdiction. And so like starting with Hong Kong, I think the key thing here is that we have a certainty of process. It's transparent. If you meet the criteria, you get listed. And it's certain. Also the liquidity, as mentioned. On the other hand, vetting may be a bit more cumbersome than some others, but then, you know, it's for our own good, because at times we haven't asked that due diligence question. The exchange in the vetting would ask it, and we said, what a good question. So let's have the answer. So it's actually, you know, a good thing for us. Now, if you look at PRC, obviously valuation is normally seen to be higher. And therefore, if you want to have a higher valuation, people might want to delist from Hong Kong and list in China. In fact, that's really what's been happening for a lot of these take private. Eventually, they would like to list in China, in my mind. But China has got this issue with the uncertainty of the listing process. The A-share approval, you've heard about the long queues. You've heard about people waiting for, you know, a long time and not really knowing where they stand. And so that is a huge thing that would impact on the decision making. And for the UK, is simpler vetting. But in the past, for Chinese or Asian businesses listed on the UK, The problem is liquidity. So this goes back to David's point about investors' knowledge and, you know, where your investors are. European investors, are they interested in trading stocks in China or businesses of, you know, stocks of businesses in China? So that somewhat hampers the UK's attempt to attract Chinese companies listing on the London Stock Exchange. Now, US, we all know, simpler vetting, because really buyers beware, they don't really vet you as much. So the process is easier. There was one time a banker making this comment to me when we were doing a dual Hong Kong US listing, and they said, look, so Hong Kong is only 10% of the deal because you only slate 10% of the global offering for the Hong Kong retail offering. The 90% is international, including US. But the work is 90% of the work because of, you know, the way the vetting is so much more hands-on at the Hong Kong regulators, whereas in the US they are far more hands-off. But is that a good thing or bad? Maybe it's not necessarily a good thing, because then you are exposed to US litigation risks. And because this is the way the market runs there, if something's wrong in the disclosure, the regulators don't come to you, but the investors will just sue you. And so that's the US. And lastly, Singapore, again, is very simple vetting. I think they're very competitive. But what I understand is usually valuation is lower, and therefore people might not, you know, want to go to Singapore for that reason.
Right, thank you. I mean, while we are comparing listing in Hong Kong and certain other overseas exchanges, we've covered mainly on what happens pre-listing, what kind of considerations you would put into regulatory requirements, etc. I mean, David has raised as one of his points, what's happening post-listing. And in this respect, I would like to maybe ask our speakers to share a bit on what's happening post-listing, namely what our capital market can offer to our businesses that has listed in Hong Kong. So when we talk about, you know, the capital market, we'll see that recently, you know, after the pandemic, we can see that the US, European capital markets kind of start to slowly coming back. But the Hong Kong market still looks relatively sluggish, if I may. What do you think are the key factors considered by international investors in investing in the Hong Kong, you know, capital market? Can I maybe ask David to share from his perspective first, and then obviously also Christina?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Well, indeed, you know, the recovery of the IPO market in EMEA or in US was mainly driven by the strong rebound year to date, you know, in the relevant stock market indices, and they are led by mainly the high growth company, the tech company in particular, and because of the secondary market improvement, is also like improved, you know, the investor sentiment towards all types of capital market transaction in those areas, and in turn, you know, it's led to a revival of the relevant, you know, IPO market. For Hong Kong, I think Hong Kong has a high beta correlation with China. And unfortunately, so far, the economic data from China tend to fall short of expectation. And when we talk to many, you know, like global investors about, you know, buying into the Hong Kong IPO market, many of them are telling us that they are still like cautious. They are still, you know, monitoring like development of certain things. For example, you know, they are looking at the efficacy of some of the stimulus rolled out by the Chinese government. And also they are looking at the global economic or political development, particularly, you know, for next year. They're looking at the election in Taiwan in January, the election in US in November. They're also, you know, closely watching the US-China political development, and also they are also speculating when the US Fed interest rate is going to pivot. So I think, you know, overall, I think we are still hopeful that the Hong Kong market will come back. If you look at, you know, what happened in the Europe or in the US, what I think will help a recovery in Hong Kong will be, firstly, we hope to see a strong rally in trading volume, in price performance of existing listed companies. And then after that, if we can have a handful of very successful large cap IPO in Hong Kong with very strong market performance, then I would expect, you know, the Hong Kong IPO market to strongly come back. And another thing is that, like we have seen, you know, some recovery already in the US and in the EMEA IPO market. And when valuation get to a certain point, I think some of the investor may start to look outside of US and Europe, and Hong Kong definitely will be one of the market they definitely will want to move money into.
Yeah, maybe I can just add a slightly, you know, different angle from the secondary market perspective, right? When we talk about, you know, foreign investors trying to shy away from, you know, investing into China, I usually would look at one data, which I think is really, really useful for me, right? You probably have heard about Stock Connect, right? Stock Connect is not just the enabling mainland investors to, you know, directly participate in the trading of Hong Kong stocks, but it also allows, you know, foreign investors to kind of use Stock Connect to invest in A-share market. So we usually would look at what we call, you know, foreign investors going into invest in the mainland market. We call it northbound, the northbound investment, right? So on a daily basis, right, the northbound actually trading volume is something like 104 billion RMB, right, in the first half of 2023 this year, right? So that is not a small number because it actually accounts for, you know, roughly 5%, right, of the total trading volume of China, right, on a single day. And in addition, it's actually going up, right? It's not really coming down. So the funny thing is that we all talk about, you know, money moving away from, you know, investing in China asset, but I think, you know, to some extent, they're investing directly into China through Stock Connect, and sometimes they probably not use Hong Kong as the proxy market to invest into the, you know, China market. So one thing I think we should really build up is to try to offer, you know, a bigger variety of China assets in the Hong Kong market, so that, you know, the foreign investors would still consider Hong Kong like a major component. So what I also want to use another reference point is that on a daily basis, the Hong Kong market trades approximately 120, you know, billion Hong Kong dollars. So it's actually very, very close to the 104 billion RMB that is being traded through Stock Connect in northbound, right, Stock Connect into the mainland Asia market. So what I'm saying is that already constitutes a very major sort of contribution to that market. So what I'm saying is that, you know, if Hong Kong can actually offer, you know, like the specialist technology companies in Hong Kong with a smaller market cap but a high growth story, that could be, you know, a lot more interesting for some of the foreign investors, right? If we could offer, you know, spin-offs of, you know, some of the major companies, you know, in automobile, you know, manufacturing, that they're building their EV business, and that can be a, you know, separate listing in Hong Kong. Again, that would be very interesting for some of the foreign investors. So, you know, adding the sort of investable assets to the Hong Kong market, I think is extremely critical. And second thing, I think also matters a lot. I think David is right that, you know, some people have certain concerns about the growth trajectory, right, in China economy. But, you know, there's nothing we can do about it. We all have to wait out for this period of time and for things to gradually emerge from the uncertainty, and eventually people, you know, investors hate uncertainty, right? As long as some of the air is cleared, I think they'll always be coming back because it's all about relative returns. I was talking to another exchange, a peer exchange this morning, right? And they were telling me that they were talking to one European investor who has shared with them they only invest in emerging markets because they don't really see the similar kind of growth potential in the European market or in the US market. So they build a fund, you know, just to specialize in emerging market investment. So there is investors, you know, the bunch of investors who will be happy to see that kind of growth, and all we have to do is to wait out. And the last thing about, you know, the Hong Kong IPO market, I think, you know, which is also relevant, is really the, you know, how can issuers and investors can come into terms with the sort of a valuation, right? Because a lot of issuers are still kind of, you know, stayed in the past, right? They're thinking about, you know, in 2020, 2021, when they come into the market, what kind of, you know, PEs or even PS they can get in this market versus today. The world has moved on. So even, you know, when I traveled to ASEAN, right, when we're talking to the unicorns from local market, they're saying that, you know, what they're doing is that, you know, they're trying to kind of, you know, discipline themselves in terms of what kind of investments they want to make in the next couple of years, partly because of all these different dynamics that are going on. So I guess the corporates also have to kind of readapt to this new environment, and they just have to prepare for not just a good time, but also for the bad times. And if you look at the companies, we talk about 18A biotech companies, and all these companies who have already completed a Hong Kong listing feel very lucky, because if they come out today, they may not be able to have the same appetite from the investors, right? So it's not just about whether you can reach to a certain valuation, but it's also about a good timing to come into this market and to be available in this market, so that you have a sufficient sort of sources of capital raise going forward. So that kind of flexibility is actually extremely important in such a volatile market as of today.
Right, thank you so much. These are also helpful. Well, now before we move on to the next topic, I've actually got a special instruction from the organizer of the conference. We have a special guest speaker who will join us now for a very brief sharing, both on our topic and also generally on how corporate lawyers can help in the development of, within mainland China. This morning we have heard that the president of the Beijing Lawyers Association joined us early this morning, and now we would like to invite him to give us a bit of a sharing. If you guys don't mind, I will switch a bit to Mandarin now. 那今天早上我们在线上是有我们高子成会长，是我们北京律协的会长，是参加过我们会议。那现在我们是就是非常荣幸，就是请到高会长跟我们做一点分享。那我们现在先有请高会长，谢谢。
To be here, sorry, I cannot speak English, so I only speak Chinese. 今天上午我参加了你们这个活动，我看到美丽的女主持，接着我看到陈会长上去致辞，接着呢就是2位女主持和1位男士，这3人行吧。那个系统的原因啊，我看到你们在讲在说，而我在置身事外进不去这个系统，操作的原因，我们对这个技术还不熟悉啊。总之呢，我特别关注你们这次企业律师年会。企业律师在内地呢叫做公司律师，北京律协特别重视公司律师的工作，因为这个律师行业有大量的公司律师，也有一些公职律师。这些律师呢是协会的这个组成部分，是北京律师行业的很重要的一部分。公司律师或者企业律师，他对于职业律师或者社会律师，在职业过程中如何更好的给企业服务，他们可以给出一些特别的经验，一些内在的机理，比如说社会律师如何去竞标，如何更有可能中标，如何更有效的为企业提供服务，如何更好的获得企业的信任等等，这些都是公司律师所具有的专长。北京律协成立的2公律师工作委员会，其中就包括公司律师，也就是你们所说的企业律师。所以我对这次活动特别重视，也想通过参加你们这次活动来了解香港企业律师目前的工作状态，以及与职业律师之间的互动关系。当然我也希望职业律师能够为公司律师或者企业律师提供力所能及的一些借鉴，一些帮助。从协会的角度，也希望能够为企业律师提供一些帮助。当然，也更希望企业律师能够为行业、为律协贡献一些独特的智慧。但是呢，错过了这个机会，我相信今后还有机会啊。我想请你们4位代表我，向陈会长表达我诚挚的问候，也特别的通过你们向香港律师会的各位同仁表达问候和良好的祝愿。我特别的邀请你们 来北京旅协参观访问，来内地合作交流。因为内地的巨大的市场，对于香港律师而言，我觉得还是有巨大的合作的空间的。同时呢，内地律师北京旅协也特别的珍惜、特别的关注香港律师涉外法律服务能力，特别希望借助你们的具有特长的涉外法律服务能力来提升内地律师的涉外法律服务能力，包括自身在一线的服务能力，也包括善用国际律师资源的能力。这两个能力对内地律师而言都是欠缺的，我们迫切的希望补齐这个短板。我希望这些诉求或者这些愿望，在今后我们不断的深化和扩大交流的过程中，能够相互借鉴，能够取长补短。我相信我们的合作空间非常之大。时间关系啊，给我的时间是5分钟，所以我就再一次表达我的真诚的愿望。恳请你们，邀请你们在你们方便的时候来北京旅协参观访问，我们进行深入的、广泛的交流。我希望我们有更多的广泛的合作空间。谢谢大家。
好，非常感谢高会长。Thank you, President Gao. Now returning to our topic about, returning to our IPO main topic. Okay, we talk about mainland China a lot of time, but then Hong Kong Stock Exchange does not only serve China, we serve the world. That's our goal, right? So let's talk a bit about foreign stocks. I mean, we have seen a wave of Hong Kong IPOs by overseas businesses. In the last decade, there have been a lot of such IPOs. But there haven't been many of such listings on Hong Kong Stock Exchange since then. What do we think are the major challenges in convincing overseas businesses to consider listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange? Maybe you can ask David to give us some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I think, if you look back, back in like 2010, 2011, there were quite a number of companies from overseas, truly overseas companies listed in Hong Kong. But some of them already listed, mainly because of the lack of liquidity. And the reason of the low liquidity partly attributed to some of them being secondary listed in Hong Kong. So when a company is still listed in 2 exchanges, the trading over time tend to gravitate towards the primary market, so leaving the secondary market being an orphan. And for some of them, the withholding tax issue also undermines the liquidity. And another thing that when we pitch overseas company to come to Hong Kong to list, typically the first question they ask will be, what are my nexus to China? Meaning that what was my revenue exposure in China? If there's no nexus to China, why should I consider listing my company in Hong Kong as opposed to a listing venue where majority of my business are domiciled? So this is the second thing. But I think overall, I'm actually hopeful that there will be more overseas companies coming to list in Hong Kong, particularly with the effort that the exchange has done since 2022. I think there are 3 things that exchange I think have done remarkably. The first one is the regulatory aspect. I think they have amended the listing rule. They now streamline the standard of investor protection to make it a uniform standard applicable to all overseas companies. They also codify lots of common waiver for overseas companies to list in Hong Kong. And the second aspect is the marketing front. I think the exchange have entered into MOU with Saudi Arabia, with Indonesia very recently this year, and I know that they're also working towards getting more Vietnam companies to list in Hong Kong. So all these are very positive. And once there is a cluster of overseas listed company built up in Hong Kong, then I would expect more research coverage on those companies and then more secondary trading. And what we want to see is an ecosystem created for this sort of overseas listed company in Hong Kong. And with that ecosystem, then hopefully the Hong Kong market will evolve from a China-centric market to a truly international market for all types of overseas issuers. Thanks.
Thanks, David. I think another aspect would be Stock Connect, right? Now that foreign stocks would be eligible for the Stock Connect program. Do we expect, Hong Kong can, through this Stock Connect program kind of revive the interest from overseas issuers, and how do you think we can do that, Christina?
Well, I think, I just want to sort of talk about this from the perspective of the issuer, from the corporate, right? If you are a corporate sort of domiciled in another country, right, so to speak, why would you want to go to Hong Kong, right? So in terms of, global listing, it has not been, sort of for everybody. It doesn't really work for everybody, right? It has to be working for a certain group of potential corporates, number one. And number two, if you look at the so-called global exchanges, there aren't that many global exchanges, right, in this world. So there are probably, NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange and London and then us. And then if you look at the, New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ sort of IPO fundraise on an annual basis, roughly, right, it ups and downs, right, but roughly 20% to 30% of it actually is contributed by foreign companies, and about 40% is from China companies, right? So if you think about that, it's not really it's interesting because a lot of the Chinese companies cannot get listed in the domestic markets. Therefore, they would go to the US for listing. But then the rest of the US foreign listings that are very, very concentrated on Americas, like the Mexican companies, Brazilian companies, Canadian companies, followed maybe, right, by EMEA, but that's only like 15% or 10% or something like that. So what I'm saying is that if you think about Hong Kong, how can we actually make it more global? We still have to establish the relevance. It cannot be just randomly any company think of, I think Hong Kong might be interesting, right? Let's go to Hong Kong. So what is the relevance is an extremely critical question that we have to answer, right? And then I think number one, for sure, Stock Connect, right? For any company that seek for an overseas listing, usually the company is not all that happy with the domestic listing for some reason, right? Because they have limited, say, investor base, or the local capital market, mechanism is not well developed, or the listing rules are kind of not quite there yet, or the investor base is just domestic, one thing or the other, right? So we have to kind of get to the several layers down to figure out exactly what may be interesting for that company to consider a foreign listing. And then when it comes to foreign listing, then what type of liquidity or what type of investor base they're trying to seek, right? It could be US, or it could be European, it could be Hong Kong. But why Hong Kong is so different? It's because it's the only global exchange can offer both global liquidity and China liquidity. We all know that China still has a pretty stringent capital control for all the right reasons, right? And then then it's impossible, right? Because for any foreign company to just think of, I should do a roadshow in China, right, to talk with the China investors, and therefore they can invest in my company. That doesn't happen, right? Because they cannot really do it, freely. Therefore, we have to find a place where people can meet, right? And that place is Hong Kong, right? Then companies can come and list in Hong Kong. Therefore, the mainland investors can use the Stock Connect to invest in that company. In the meantime, you're not losing the global liquidity because the US investors, European investors are still in Hong Kong, right? But you have the incremental captive market of China domestic money. And then that's something that you will never be able to see in any other place. But if we couldn't really kind of broadcast it widely enough, or with a clear focus to establish the relevance, it's not going to happen. So that's why we are building this relationship in ASEAN, because as I said, geographical proximity matters. People are not going to kind of waste sort of wake up every midnight to deal with their foreign listings, right? They have to find a market where the time zone is relatively close, so we actually make sense to the ASEAN growing economy, right? And then even because we're talking about IPO, if you're looking at other more mature market or developed markets, almost all the quality assets are already publicly traded, so they have a less appetite for incremental growth. But in ASEAN, there's a it's actually at the very starting point where we can actually capture the opportunity. And same with the Middle East and other emerging market that may have a closer tie with us. But there's, that doesn't really prevent, the European companies and even the American companies to consider, Hong Kong, exactly for the particular reason that David mentioned, right? The geopolitical considerations. How can you actually try to, stay in China to do business in China, while trying to maintain like, a profile where, the parent company doesn't really get too much exposed, right? And in that way, right, you can potentially do a spin-off listing in Hong Kong. Therefore, the spin-off vehicle is a self-sufficient in terms of capital raise, in terms of R&D, right, in terms of a lot of the operations that they have to deal with. So all these actually are extremely interesting, topics that we should be, able to, carry with the potential issuers, corporates from the, various jurisdictions. So I'm actually very hopeful, but it's not easy, right? For all the things that you mentioned that, like it's 90% of the time is spent on Hong Kong listing, the vetting and stuff. And if it's a foreign listing, it will require another doubling the effort, tripling the effort because of different jurisdictions, different rules and laws, and when it comes to like the operations, right? So there's so many things to work on. But what I'm saying is that now we're dealing with a market, where there's no easy money to be made, right? You would just have to be a lot more hardworking and a lot more smart in order to capture our share of the the market development.
Right. Thank you so much. I mean, we have covered in length on the challenges we're facing. How do we compare with other fellow exchanges? How do we fare in Hong Kong? Can we maybe to wrap up? I'm conscious of the time. To wrap up, can we maybe talk a bit about going forward? What should we do? As the exchange from the regulatory perspective, from the as advisors, what we can do further to help the Hong Kong IPO and capital markets. Maybe some last words of advice from each of you. Maybe can we start with Benita first, and Christina, and then David?
Sure. So I've seen clients who I helped list 20 years ago, being a small company, growing to the largest in its industry today. So really the possibilities for, accessing the capital markets and growing after listing is huge. IPO is only the beginning. And I think really what we as lawyers want to do is to know the rules well, know the markets well, know the clients' need well, put all of them together. And I'm sure we will actually have a better tomorrow.
Where we have always positioned ourselves as the super connector between China and the rest of the world. And I think that will continue to be the case, right, in the coming years. But when we talk about connectivity, it's not just the connectivity in terms of hardware, for example, like the Stock Connect, where we can facilitate the trading, but it's also about connectivity, across border in a lot of the software, right, the softer parts. For example, right, like the foreign investors access to China corporates, or vice versa, right? The China investors access to global corporates, right? So these kind of dialogues need to be held. And we as an exchange is not just about, trying to get the infrastructure ready, but we're also trying to create like a, market space that hopefully that people can communicate better and can exchange ideas and can exchange all the, wonderful growth opportunities, by working much closer with each other.
Yeah, thanks. Indeed, I myself is very optimistic that the Hong Kong market will come back, given the cyclical nature we have seen in the past. Indeed, this year we have seen a very strong, pipeline of China-related company start kicking off the IPO. They're just waiting for the market. And in terms of foreign companies, what we have seen before the pandemic was that many MNC are considering to spin off their Asia or China business to list on Hong Kong. And once the markets come back, and I'm sure that those things will back onto their agenda. And so myself, I'm very optimistic, on the prospect of the Hong Kong market.
Right. Thank you so much for the very valuable advice and sharing. I don't think we have time to take any questions from the floor, but feel free to contact them directly. Sorry.
Yeah, just
go
a
ahead,
quick one.
please.
The reason why I want to ask this question is the Law Society has recently actually visited Dubai. As you know, it's the DIFC. I think they're very much talking about whether we can do a sort of like a second listing in their market or even vice versa. So I think Belinda and Christina, you mentioned about this before. So how do you see that? Is it we are competing with them, or basically we can actually collaborate with them in the future?
Yeah, definitely we should collaborate with them, right? Abu Dhabi as well as Dubai. Dubai has apparently DFM, and Abu Dhabi has ADX, and these are all potential partners. Actually, I visited them just in late of April, so I think definitely there's a room for growth. And apparently ADNOC, right, that is listed on Abu Dhabi Exchange this year, is one of the largest IPO so far this year. And why it makes sense for us to collaborate is because apparently the local markets offer the local investors, but we all know that they have deep pockets for sure, right? But on the other hand, they also want to be seen as a kind of a company with global standards in terms of corporate governance, in terms of a lot of other aspects. So coming into Hong Kong makes sense to a lot of them, that will enhance their global standing in many of amongst the investors, and the investors feel a lot more confident, and information disclosure and stuff will all be kind of more aligned with the international standards. So definitely, I think there'll be a lot of room for collaboration, and also if they can prove that the companies themselves are fundamental-wise are attractive, right? That'll be very appealing for a lot of the Asian investors, including China investors.
Right. So I think we can wrap up the discussion for today. Feel free to contact the speakers directly should you have any further question or other matters you want to discuss with them. So thank you very much again.
Thank you all, and please stay. May we now invite our Vice President, Mr. Roden Tong, again to present you a souvenir on behalf of the Law Society. Roden, please. Thank you, Roden, and thank you again, all our panelists. Before we come to an end, may I invite Chairman of the In-House Lawyers Committee, Mr. Adamus Wong, to deliver his closing remarks for us. Adamus, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending this conference. So as this conference is drawing to a close, let me thank a few persons who contributed significantly to the successful organization of this conference. First and foremost, I would like to thank the MC, Catherine Lau. She's actually an in-house lawyer with one of our sponsors, Canon. She's the GC at Canon. So if I mention Canon, obviously I have to mention other sponsors as well. We definitely need to thank our diamond sponsor, China Resources, LexisNexis, Thomson Reuters, our platinum sponsors, China Resources Land, Harneys, Link, L-Link Law Offices, and Witters for the successful organization of this conference. And obviously, I want to thank the speakers as well, without whom there will not be such a wonderful contents of the conference. But most important of all are the participants, you, both in this hall and joining us online. And I'm very glad to say that today we actually have fellow practitioners in the GBA regions as well as Belt and Road countries joining us, and also over Greater China. And we actually also have GBA fellow practitioners from GBA areas in this hall participating in this conference today with us. So all of you actually contributed to the great success of this conference. So it is goodbye for now, and I hope to see you all next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Adamus. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the conference. Please join me in giving a round of applause to today's panelists and distinguished guests and speakers. Kindly complete the evaluation forms by scanning the QR codes at the back of the brochure, and please also don't forget your personal belongings before you leave. For those who have taken an audio device, please return them to the registration counter. More event photos are coming. Please keep your photo QR codes so you can access them after the conference. Thank you so much for coming. We hope to see you next year. Thank you.